Okay, it appears that we are streaming live. Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, July 1st, and the time is 9:01 a.m. And I would like to call to order the Community Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting. We will be doing our meeting via teleconference, and the first item on the agenda is the chairperson's roll call, and I will go ahead and do that. I am Basha Adamczak, 7th Ward Council and Chairwoman, and with us is Jennifer Ozinger, the Council Clerk, Nikki Posterly, Beverly Hosey, Councilwoman Lauren McNally, Committee Member, Councilman Julius Oliver, Committee Vice Chair, Councilwoman Samantha Turner, Rick Deek, Sharon Woodbury, Rich Harvey, Hunter Morrison, Don Montero, Jeff Limbian, and there is one more person on here. If you could announce yourself. Rick, do you know who the last person on the call is?
I don't know. 519-3098.
Okay, maybe we'll go ahead and try to send them a message so we know who is also with us. Okay, the next item on the agenda is new business, and under new business, we're going to go over the fiscal year 2020 CDBG and home annual action plan. Beverly, would you like to go ahead and start?
Yeah, I believe Nikki's going to start and then pass it over to me.
Okay, thank you, Nikki.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Council, for taking time away from your summer recess to review the city's 5-year consolidated plan with us. Just want to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work put into the completion of this plan by the Community Development Division, excuse me, headed by Beverly Hosey, Rufus Hudson, Assistant Compliance Director, Rich Harvey, Fiscal Officer, Don Montero, Contracted Monitor and Compliance Director, the work put in from Holland and Nottingham, our consultants, as well as the oversight, review, and approval by myself, Hunter, and the mayor. When we started looking at this plan last fall, realizing the city was nearly a year behind schedule, we knew we had a $20 million weight on our shoulders. Amassed this with the COVID pandemic and then the trigger of racial injustice, all the stress we were feeling going into this truly tested our resilience. However, I'm proud to say that we pushed through, and although we're not at the finish line, we look forward to getting these services out into the community and getting the funds into the hands of those who need it. So that being said, I'm going to turn this segment over to Beverly so she can review the plan and the budget.
Thank you, Nikki. Go ahead, Beverly.
Okay, thank you. And may I ask also if Rich Harvey, if he's on the line, if he would please, while I'm doing this, send an email copy of the applicants for the 2020 funding.
The initial list, Beverly, of
yes, that you have that that you made for me with who applied, how much they applied for, and so forth.
Sure, I'll send it to the people that you mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you. And what I wanted to go through today was just a brief statement before we actually go through the budget. There's
Beverly, I'm sorry to interject. I just quickly want to state for the record too that Mayor Brown is on the call. But go ahead.
All right, thank you. There are just 5 points that I want to go over, and this will be brief. The first one is a brief statement regarding the CDBG program. Number 2, the HUD required process for city to receive the annual allocation. 3, we're going to just take a brief, quick look at the annual action plan document that is in front of you, and it says on the front of it, expected resources. We'll do a brief overview of the scoring process and the CDBG annual budget recommendations submitted to the CPED committee for review and discussion, and then just a brief introduction to the 5-year consolidated plan. Okay, number 1, the Community Development Block Grant Program provides annual grants on a formula basis to cities to, quote, develop viable urban communities by providing decent housing, and a suitable living environment, and by expanding economic opportunities, principally for low and moderate income persons, end quote. Entitlement communities such as the city of Youngstown develop their own programs and funding priorities. However, the city must give maximum feasible priority to activities which benefit low and moderate income persons, and also must follow CDBG regulations and regulatory processes. Number two, how does the city receive its annual allocation? First, the city must prepare and submit an annual action plan to HUD for the upcoming fiscal year, which in this case is fiscal year 2020. The plan also serves as a key strategic planning tool. It is the city's application for CDBG funds and provides guidance and direction for Youngstown to administer this federal program to address community development goals and priority needs. The plan includes the city's expected funding resources and stated community development goals, and provides information about planned projects, including their geographic distribution and the activity categories and development objectives under which they fall. The creation of the annual action plan includes community outreach, stakeholder meetings, public meetings, and the solicitation of requests for proposals from local nonprofits. City departments also request CDBG funds for activities that could be funded. Next, I would like you just briefly look at the document that was given to you, and it says on the front, this is the draft of the annual action plan. And on the front of the document, it says expected resources. And unfortunately, this document is not page numbered, but I'd like you just to flip back to page 5, what would be page 5. And at the top of that page, it says annual goals and objectives. So that page and page 6, the next page. And what this particular page does, it breaks down the goals, the categories such as affordable housing, and then the amount of funding that we are allocating to that particular goal, the geographic area, and the need that this funding and this goal is intended to address. So when you're looking at and going over the actual budget line items, this is where and how we establish those priorities for our funding recommendations. Okay, now I'm going to go back to point 4, scoring. The Community Development Division staff collects, reviews, and evaluates proposals submitted by nonprofit agencies during the annual action plan process. This is an impartial evaluation process designed to, first, ensure that the community development agency evaluators submit an unbiased budget recommendation to our CPED director. And 2, the scoring gives the city the opportunity to make impactful grants to our nonprofit partners. And I just want to make this one extra point, additional point about the scoring. An application does not necessarily need to be strong in all the rating categories in order to project the likelihood to have a major impact on the city. For example, a proposed project that is by its nature not innovative may still be essential to advance city goals, objectives, and strategies. Now, on the other hand, a strong application that is innovative, professionally written, and proposes an activity that will be managed by an experienced nonprofit staff may not be essential to advance city goals, objectives, and strategies. So I'd like for you to also keep that in mind. And the final point is just a brief introduction to the 5-year consolidated plan. In addition to the annual action plan that we're going over today, every 5 years, the city must submit the annual action plan alongside a consolidated plan that outlines the city's long-term community development needs, priorities, and strategic plan. The 2020 to 2024 5-year consolidated plan and the 2020 annual action plan will be posted on the city's website today, July 1st through August 1st, for the HUD federal mandated 30-day public display period and public comment period. And we will make sure that you have a copy of this plan to have at a to be announced date for another CPED committee meeting to review the document prior to council approving this document after the 30-day comment period ends on August 1st and before or by August 5th, 2020. Now I'd like to turn this back to Councilwoman Adams-Act.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. Councilman Oliver?
Thank you, through the chair. So Beverly, forgive me if I sound a little confused, but based on what you just said, you basically said the scoring means nothing.
No, I didn't say it means nothing. I said that we actually have 5 funding categories, and that we don't just depend on the one specific, for example, we don't depend on one specific item such as project readiness. So even if the project has completely ready and so forth, we consider that does it still meet the city's goals and priorities that our community has established during the action plan process. So just to say again, that the evaluation is based on different tools, several tools.
So the scoring mechanism has to meet the city's vision or expectations, even though it could be a great plan or they have great ideas, it doesn't, and they get a high score. If it doesn't meet what the city deems to be, appropriate or in line with the city's vision, then that's a lesser score or still a high score?
Okay, so I think what we want to do is, what my intention is, Julius, to get us away from actually depending solely on what the end score is. So the end score might end up between 60 and 75. So even that 60 application could have something in it that indicates that it might have a greater impact on the city than impact provided by the one with a higher score. So when we're talking about HUD funds, what they're mainly looking for is impact. That's what we report on at the end of each year and at the end of 5 years. And plus, we do have to consider what the community has advised as priority needs. So again, we're just not looking at one aspect of an application. We're looking at, an application as a whole, but in the end, it's still an impartial, unbiased look, okay? Because it is based on factors.
Julius, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. I think the best way, because there's a lot to go over. I guess, are there any questions from my colleagues regarding, I guess, the process aspect of it? And then, if there's not, then we'll kind of move on to this year's requests and recommendations. So go ahead, Councilwoman McNally.
Just a quick question. So Beverly, you collected during public comment period priorities from the residents. for this year?
Not necessarily during the public comment period. We had stakeholder meetings in which we invited the public, general public, and we invited our nonprofit agencies, and we had separate meetings. We had a meeting for public service agencies. We had a meeting for the homeless provider agencies, economic development, housing. And so we had all these different stakeholder meetings in which the public was invited and the agencies.
Do you have some type of like report or that data compiled on something that's easily digestible, that we can
Yep.
see what came out of those meetings this year as top
Yes.
priorities?
That is what this annual action plan document
So it's
is.
it's weaved into that.
Yes, it is the document that we must submit. It is a template that HUD gives to all its grantees, that we have to submit an annual action plan every year, and then every 5 years, we submit a 5-year action plan.
Lauren, did you have a direct follow-up?
I guess, are they are the things? I mean, okay.
I think what Lauren is asking is, I mean, I see where we have in the packet we received what the goals and objectives are, and what I'm understanding is that was derived from those meetings. But
Yes,
I think
it is.
I think what Lauren is asking, do we have, other than this packet that was constructed from those meetings, do we have information solely based on those meetings that show, you know, in first priority was, you know, this topic because this is how many participants chose that, like something that actually shows us what the direct outcome was from each meeting?
This is the actual documents we've in. Now, we have a consultant working with us on this document. So we took notes, and I have notes from it, but the important part is that it is all weaved into this plan as it has been in the past. And we have to send in, if someone comments, people have sent me email comments, and we send those email comments in with the application to HUD. So after following the meeting, we had maybe about 6 people that had comments about what we had talked about in the stakeholder meetings and so forth, and in the public meetings. We also had a public meeting that the public was invited to, and anybody in general in the city of Youngstown to come to the public meeting to talk about what we had listed in the stakeholder meetings.
Okay, Lauren, go ahead, direct follow-up, and then Samantha had her hand up, and then Julius.
Yeah, so I'm just, so basically, under annual goals and objectives, the sort order column of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like the numbers are maybe the order of importance based off these meetings, and then the goal name were the goals identified at these meetings.
Yes, and it's based on data collected. Now, a lot of the data was collected from surveys, and a lot of data is from HUD. You know, we have census tract data. We have housing data. A lot of that is available. So all of that information is compiled within this document to establish like housing needs. So we know what our housing stock is. We know how many vacant houses we have. We know the condition of our housing. So what we do then is base, and I believe YNDC this year also did an extra survey where we surveyed the community, and people were able to give their opinion on rental housing. How do they feel about these different aspects of our city? And all of that is weaved into this plan, but then we categorize it. Okay, so it's categorized according to priorities and goals. What's the city's goals? So it's not just CDBG goals, it's also the city's goals. So we had several conversations in order to put this document together, and relied heavily on data also, Lauren.
Yep, I understand now. I'm seeing it. I understand how the document is reflecting. Thank you.
Mhm.
Samantha?
Okay, so I know we're gonna go over the budget in detail, but of the meetings you had, what percentage of the people that applied and or received received funding actually attended those meetings?
I would have to look at that because you didn't necessarily have to be at the meeting to apply for the funding. It's not mandatory to attend those meetings, but the general public is advised. We have to do public notices and so forth so that everyone knows they are invited to these meetings for the purpose of input and opinion.
Okay, and through the chair, direct follow-up.
ahead.
I see that it's broken down. How did you come up with the matrix to build the community conversations around? So yeah, that's how did you come up with that matrix to focus on those particular? I might have missed that. You may have already said it.
Okay. Yes, Samantha, that we have a template that HUD provides. It is a universal template. So we ask our questions based on the information that we must fill out and submit in the document. So for instance, there is a section that says priority needs housing. So we ask questions to get people to talk about what they think about the needs are for housing. Infrastructure, then we ask questions about what do you want regarding infrastructure, and persons that were participating in the process gave their comments, input, and opinions on that. And the document is directly based on that data.
Samantha,
Great.
follow up.
Yes, and also, is there like a miscellaneous section where the community can say, you know, this is really what's important to us, and you can go back to HUD, or is it just exactly what HUD lays down and you have to follow those guidelines, or is there room for the community to focus on something else, or for your stakeholders to want to focus on something else?
The comments. So the 30-day, we have comment periods. So we write a document, then we put it on public display. So then during that 30-day period that I mentioned that this particular consolidated plan and annual action plan will be on public display, then the public does have the opportunity to write a comment about the plan that we have displayed, anything about it, or they could they could either write it or email it, so it could be a letter in a letter form, or an email comment of, okay, maybe I want to talk about broadband and there's nothing in your plan that talks about that. So, and then we have to submit all of those comments along with the plan when we submit it to HUD, and they review that. And it is a regulation that we are regulated to collect those comments and to have a citizen participation plan, which we do have.
Okay, and then, thank you. And through the chair, just to follow up on that. So now the comment period starts today and it goes for 30 days. During that time, if you get, for example, someone that says broadband or, citywide internet access is not included in your plan, and, they would like that to be in the plan or funding allocated there, then you have to adjust your plan and adjust funding, or how does that work when you get that influx of comment? How do you react to it traditionally?
Traditionally, we haven't had any comments that actually ask us to change a plan. So it might be something that is related to housing. And so this year we do happen to have broadband talked about and discussed in the plan, but no one applied. So that's just something the city will look at moving forward during the next 5 years. It's part of our strategy to, as a city, work on issues regarding broadband, because this is a 5-year strategic plan. So no one's actually applied for broadband, but it is a discussion. And then we have to figure out as a city how do we address this need?
And I'm sorry, Bob, direct follow-up.
Go
So is there, when the public makes their comments and their suggestions, is there room for adjustment in the plan, or maybe I should say in the budget this year? If you get an influx of comments on any different topic that's not present here, and maybe an organization applied for a grant and, you know, we just didn't deem it necessary this year, is there room for changes, or this is just to gather the public comment? I'm just want to get clear on.
I don't understand. Would you repeat your question? Are you asking that if we have, let me repeat, that if we have a budget, that it has different line items and there's nothing in there for what a certain person has asked about, can we include it?
Yes.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Well, that depends upon if we had an application for that particular, to address that particular need or desire. Now, moving forward, what we would probably say to that individual or agency, that we will discuss that during this current year and try to address that in our future during that 5-year plan. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted, if people give comment, I just don't want them to think that the comment is going to fall on deaf ears. We're going to respond. If we can't put it or move things around this year, we can actually address it the following years or inside of those 5 years.
Yes, and that's why we do have that 5 years in order to kind of implement our strategic plan. And that's why we accept those comments, so we will know what we need to do moving forward.
Thank you. I was going to make a similar, I guess, comment, even speaking regarding our annual goals and objectives, the 10 that are listed. And I know you said those are gathered from, you know, community input as well as like statistics and data that HUD provides. But I think some of these two would differ. For example, in our community, that the priority would be in a different order. Like on here, the first one listed is increased supply of housing, which I feel that in Youngstown, we don't need that. We have a lot of housing, so much so that we have a lot of dilapidated homes that need, you know, demolished. So I think, you know, once this is made public and we are able to garner more, you know, comments and opinions from our constituency, some adjustments, you know, should or could be made. But Julius, you had your hand up. Oh, go ahead, Beverly.
Yes, through the chair. These are the priorities that were discussed. So that's what I'm saying. These items were discussed as far as housing through discussion and through survey, that our community has stated that increase the supply of housing. So that could be rental housing, and that could include too affordable housing, quality of housing. So that's just a basic goal. Okay, so under that goal, there are several different layers to that, to meeting that goal of increased supply of housing. So we have been in many discussions about that as a city and to plan this document.
Oh, and as you were saying that, I actually now have a question. So say, for example, we get a lot of, you know, this, you said, from the people that participate in, you know, surveys and give comments. Unfortunately, the reality is that a lot of people don't attend these meetings and don't really give their input. So in the future, if we as a city, whether it's as council or as administration, if we know that there are certain gaps, you know, and things and voids that need to be filled, can't we publicly, you know, aside of taking the community comments, can't we let the community know these are the voids we're looking to fill, and is there an agency able to fill these voids, and therefore, you know, submit an application?
So
and
we
then,
do.
and then Julius, because I know Julius has been waiting.
Okay. Do you want me to address that?
Yeah,
your
go ahead.
point okay, through the chair. Affordable housing actually is one of HUD's goals that they expect, is that is their main goal. So their funding. So when we have that as a priority, a part of that is not only based on survey and so forth, it is based on what HUD expects us to do with that funding that one of their main goals is affordable housing. And on top of that, because we have data that shows that most residents in the city of Youngstown, whether they be homeowners or renters, have a housing cost burden that is between 30 and 50% of their income. So affordable housing is not only a key component of getting HUD funding, but it is a key need in the city of Youngstown, affordable housing. And that's evidenced by data.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Julius, because you had your hand up for a while.
Pretty much kind of asked my questions already, Councilwoman Adams Act. But just to add to your point, when it comes to housing, I think a lot of the issues we have in Youngstown is that, the reason why people move out to the suburbs is not because Youngstown doesn't have enough housing stock. It's because Youngstown doesn't have a newer or modern, up-to-date housing stock. A lot of our housing stock is old, so people are looking for basically better housing to live in. And one of the things I can see in my ward, I don't know if anybody else is having this problem, but a lot of the choice homes that were supposed to switch over to home ownership, after 10 or 15 years of renting, that's not being the case. A lot of those houses are being vacated. And in my ward, I know a lot of them are being turned into group homes or sober homes or something like that. So it's still off the table for our residents to be able to purchase those homes to live in. The question I really had was, it's kind of like what Basha said. How many people actually got surveyed when, the surveys went out? Because like she said, a lot of people don't come to these meetings. So do we mail out surveys to, people in the community, to our residents, for them to return the mailers and be able to ask these questions and have them answered? Do we put the surveys in the water bills so, people can have, so all of our residents can have input rather than just the few, that are surveyed that YNDC may reach out to or may come to a meeting, or those, certain neighborhood associations that stay active? Is there a way that the city is actively trying to reach out to all of our residents to compile what all of the needs are when it comes to these CDBG funds? And then the second question is, when it comes to the scoring process of those applicants who are, basically that you guys feel should get CDBG funds, is there plans in the future to have a more regulated, streamlined, or universal way of choosing who actually gets these funds, tracking, how well of a job they've done with the funds in the past, how have that organization actually affected the community in a positive way? Because I think every year these are the same questions that we kind of come with, and there's never really a definite answer to say, yes, this organization did this, and this was what the result of it. This is where we're able to score or map out as these are the results of them receiving these funds. I don't think we get that. So we give out this money every year, and every year it's kind of like our residents are like, well, what happened to the so-and-so $1 million that went into CDBG funds? Because I didn't really see that in my neighborhood, So,
Okay. Yes.
Well, I just one second, and I think Beverly, if you can answer the portion regarding the survey and the outreach, and I know there's about 1,700 responses that were received from YNDC, and then the second portion regarding restructuring in the future. Nikki, if you can answer that portion, please. But go ahead, Beverly, we'll start with you.
Through the chair, when Councilman Oliver talked about impact, that is one of our goals, and that's a city effort. And that goes back to the point of doing the document and choosing agencies. So one of our first goals is, when we're evaluating applications, as I mentioned in my introduction about impact, and anytime that you would like to have information about that, we gather that information. We are mandated by HUD as monitoring and compliance. We monitor on a yearly basis each of these agencies that apply and are approved for funding, we don't just leave, fund it and leave it alone. This is a yearly, monthly, daily process that we are interacting with these agencies so that they have to send reports. We do remote monitoring, that is requests for reimbursement. We scrutinize what kind of costs they have incurred. They have to be approved prior. They have an agreement to which they must stick to, adhere to all the regulations and guidelines in that agreement. So they agree. These agencies have a border control approved agreement that they will abide by not only HUD regulations, city regulations, they will report, they will tell us, the HUD system tells us exactly what we need to collect from these agencies in order to properly monitor them. Then each year, the city, our department, is also under scrutiny for monitoring these agencies. So what we're trying to do, and one of our goals moving forward, is to be able to have enough staff, because it does take a lot of time to monitor, and I think we should be able to see more impact. And so when you think about impact, we think about, well, if we fund the park department for a project in the Wick Park area, then perhaps we would target an area, the same area, for housing. So all of our different projects are to coordinate, not to be one just to fund an agency, but we are actually implementing a strategy when we are trying to choose these agencies, and especially moving forward because of this pandemic and because housing has become such an issue. Economic development is such an issue. So now we are moving forward. We are trying desperately to look at our funded agencies according to impact or likelihood of impact compared to whatever else we fund. So we monitor these agencies very closely, and we are mandated to do it.
Julius, and then Rufus, I know how to comment. Go ahead, Julius.
So, okay, as far as impact goes, Beverly or Nikki or Sharon, whoever can answer this question. Okay, so we'll give like $80,000 to a certain organization, right? Mm-hmm. This organization is only going out in the community to improve people's roofs or improve their porches, or put banisters on their porch for safety, or improve bathrooms or something like that. So at the end of the year, we may get something that say, we may go to this agency and say, hey, so, how many houses were you able to, improve, or how did you affect the community? And they might say, well, we only got around to doing 7 roofs this year, or I think we, replaced a toilet or a bathtub in, an elderly person's bathroom. Our housing stock is super old in Youngstown. So this is going to be a never ending cycle. So I guess my ultimate question is, would it be better to transition people? And I know not everybody is going to like that idea, but transition people from the older housing stock and transition that money into actually building new homes in the city, so that people have the choice. I'm talking quality, affordable homes, not, like the choice homes that were out there. But is there plans in place? Because it seems like we're never going to catch up with all the needs of the people in poverty in Youngstown if we're always doing 7 roofs a year, or you know what I mean? It's like, what's the auxiliary plan for those funds, and to be able to help our people?
Nikki, one more, I'm sorry, Beverly. Nikki, okay. If you can kind of address that, maybe that goes in line with what the goals are, for the future of the department. If you could go over some of that, please.
Through the chair, yes, thank you. So in regards to the question you wanted me to answer about restructuring this whole scoring and the process, once we get to the budget, what you'll see is some of the applicants that have applied and have year after year applied for funding, some of them have not received any funds this time. Some of the funds have been reduced. We're taking a whole different approach in how we do things here. We want to make sure that these dollars are going to be impactful and that they meet the direct service needs of the community. So if we're funding agencies historically that have not put the money back out in the community, which it was initially allocated for, we're either reducing or not funding. If agencies are not properly expending all those funds that they have, yet they're asking for more, we're looking at that. We're looking at, as Councilman Oliver said, what is the quality that we're putting out in the community? So we took a whole different approach. I can't speak to what happened in the past or the past 5 years, but I know that one of the things that Beverly and I and the mayor's been doing, we're looking at who is it benefiting? Is it benefiting our residents or is it benefiting the agency? If it's benefiting the agency more than the residents, we're stepping back. So we're being more strategic in who we fund, and we're holding them more accountable. To the housing stock, there's a whole housing study that we've been working with YNDC for several months. We're now even at the point of weekly meetings. We're at our final draft. There is a schedule that YNDC is going to present the meeting to council, present the housing summary to council. We're looking at new construction. We're looking at how much of the old stock is rehabitable. We're looking at veterans housing. We're looking at low to moderate income housing. We're looking at higher level housing. So all of that is compiled in the housing study that will be presented to you upon return from recess.
And
Julius,
through
did you have?
Does that
direct
answer your question
follow-up?
about the housing?
Not really.
Through the chair, may I interject something?
Sure, go ahead, Beverly.
For the one thing I wanted to mention, that our CDBG funds cannot be used for new construction. So we, and that's where most of our funding, we have the 3.5 million in the CDBG funds. So the CDBG funds can be used for rehab, limited rehabilitation, or emergency situations like Councilman Oliver was talking about, porches and different things like that, maybe a furnace or plumbing and so forth. So we have emergency and then we have some limited. Now our home funds, which we only get about maybe $600,000 a year in the home funds. Now this particular year, I put aside as much as I could for construction and reconstruction. So we are, as Nikki said, we are thinking of the future, but our resources are still limited as far as what we can do for new construction. So YNDC does do acquisition and rehab houses to sell. And with our home funds, those homes are taken to total up to standard, so it could be like a new house.
So,
And then we have the home rehab. Yes.
Julius.
You have organizations like YNDC, which is a nonprofit organization, and I'm pretty sure they go out and get their money from the same pot that the city has access to get their money from too as well, correct?
I don't know all their other funding. I know they have home, different federal loans they get from banking and so forth.
Right.
Yes.
So YNDC is building new houses as well. Okay. So in the past, we've, dealt with people like Vince, who I met out in LA, who said they can come to Youngstown and totally redo the projects over on the east side, add retail, all that kind of stuff. I never heard anything else from that after that conversation was had. Great conversation with the mayor, law director, Sharon, Cal, and nothing after that. But there are people that are offering to come to Youngstown and build new housing. Right now, have people out of Phoenix that want to put millions on the table to build new housing. So it's not that we don't have access to the funds, because we do. It's about, are we actually going after these funds and these private organizations that want to put money into Youngstown, then turn the project over to Youngstown, like Howard. It just seems like the ball's being dropped somewhere.
Okay,
Because
through the chair,
Who
could
would
I
you-
address?
Go ahead. You would like, go ahead, Beverly.
Yes, I'd like to address just a portion of that, and then maybe Nikki could come in, because right now, what we're talking about is specifically the federal funds. So, and I understand fully what Councilman Oliver is saying about the other resources, but right now, what we're addressing is limited resources from the block grant point. And these will serve as gap funding to any other funding that we may be able to get from other organizations. But right now, what we wanted to do is just address what we have available for just for this particular meeting and for this particular conversation, are HUD funds. And then another larger conversation is what Councilman Oliver is talking about, how we, as a city, can get those other funds in to help support this funding, this limited funding that we get from HUD.
And I
So
think,
Yes.
the final question would be, just so I can get a final answer, do we have a plan to streamline those CDBG funds to get the biggest bang for the buck? Because it doesn't seem like we're getting the biggest bang for our buck year after year. And it is not just through my observation, it's through what I'm hearing in the community, it's through what I'm hearing after work is done and people's roofs are leaking. You know what I mean? How do we actually make sure that our citizens absolutely win from these CDBG dollars?
Okay.
Nikki, if Nikki may address that, please.
If I can, it would be helpful if we can get through the budget part of it, and then we can explain how we're looking at things differently as we go line by line and itemize that, so that you can see that we are taking a different approach and that we are being more proactive in holding agencies accountable to the funds that they're getting from the city. So once you see, what was requested, what they're getting, or if they're not, understanding why, you'll see that we are holding them more accountable and we are streamlining the process. We're making sure that our city services are first and foremost, making sure that it's performance-based this time around.
Rufus, and I know you had your hand up. Did you have a comment about something that we discussed? And then if not, we'll move on to the actual applications, requests, and recommendations. You have to unmute yourself, or hold on. Yeah, can you, okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that we take this funding very seriously. And like Beverly said, we collect data from each one of these agencies quarterly, as well as they do annual reports. And that's one of the things that I look at more closely, is the impact. If you said you were going to do X or Y or Z, I expect you to hit those numbers. And the funding is tied to their ability to be able to hit the projected numbers that they said that they were going to hit. So the impact that they're making, it is substantial, because we do hold them to their feet to the fire. We do make sure that they are responsible in their use of these funds. So we do make them accountable, and we are looking at data-driven results from these agencies. We don't just give them money and we turn them loose. We monitor them quarterly, and then we expect them also to turn in annual reports. So we have all of that data in our office as to what they have done accounting wise for the dollars that they have received.
Thank you, Rufus. I have a question. Looking at the applications, the requests and recommendations that were made, does this include all of the applicants, or are there applicants that are not listed on this document?
Are you asking me?
Anybody,
Through the chair,
whoever.
everyone who applied is on that paper.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions, or who wants to start the conversation regarding the suggested allocation of funds? Okay, I will. I have a question on here. It shows what their request was and what was recommended. Can somebody send us an email to see what was awarded to these organizations last year? And I guess it would also be important to know if they went through all of their funding. I know in previous years there was, concerns that certain organizations were awarded money but did not go through all of the money awarded to them and then still continue to apply for more funding. So if somebody could send that to us while the meeting is going on so we can take a look at that. Samantha?
Thank you, through the chair. So my first question about the budget this year, or I don't know, before I have that question, Nikki or Beverly, did you guys want to go through in detail first and then take our questions, or is it okay if I just?
Yeah, actually, do you know what? I think that's a good idea, Samantha. If they could go over how it was recommended, how much money they're going to be receiving, and what criteria was used, whether it was, more kind of, arbitrary and opinion based versus what was used when the actual scoring numerical system was used. So whoever wants to start, and I guess, we'll just start with the top with the community police program and, work our way down.
Through the chair, Rufus, would you start that, please?
And Rufus, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Rufus, you are muted.
Okay, thank you.
I'm unmuted now. Well, the community police, they asked for 200,000. The recommendation was 200,000. Litter control, they asked for 75,000. They were funded for 75,000. Dare to Dream, they had requested 75,000. They've been awarded the recommendation.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. They're not awarded. These are recommendations.
I'm saying they're recommended. I'm sorry.
Can you, Rufus, can you remind us what Dare to Dream, what they do and what their goals are within their application? So, if, some of our new council members are aware, and since we don't have the applications in front of us.
Okay, Dare to Dream was an after-school program. Basically, that's what it was. It was just an after-school program.
So what kind of goals did they have, and what metrics did we use to know that they achieved their goals, or what community needs they filled?
Well, because it was a relatively new program, they hadn't had any experience with CDBG programs. This is a program that we're recommending that has potential, that has a potential of servicing quite a few people in a designated area. I don't have the actual application in front of you to go to that detail, but it was an after-school program, and it has the potential of being impactful. once again, being a new program, this was an attempt to reach out to someone who had not been previously funded, and looking at its potential. That was one of the criterias.
Well, just a couple comments, and I don't know if my colleagues had questions. So from my understanding, so Dare to Dream has not previously been funded in the past, is
That's
that correct?
This would be the first year if they were to get funding from the city.
Okay. It seems to me, despite whether or not they have potential, that the recommendation is still pretty significant when there's other established organizations that don't get awarded even that much. But then just another comment, this is the reason why it's important that we have the applications in front of us, specifically at this time, the CPED committee, but then the rest of council, so we can actually look at the the applications. Otherwise, you know what I mean? We don't have a lot of information to work off of, so we can't do our job in a sense if we don't have the full information that's needed to make a decision. Lauren?
Through the chair, okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, Lauren, and then Beverly. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, sorry. I was wondering two things. One, if I'm comparing, say this particular organization to the plan, the big Word document plan, and you go, we have those 10 categories under the goals, which one would this fall into off those goals? Like, which one are we solving for there?
Through the chair, this is a public service to fill a general public service need for our the children in our community, children and young people.
Youth
Our
enrichment.
community.
Okay, so it would fall under number 9, assist public service providers.
Yes, it's a public service provider, and that is one of the categories that we have to fill.
Okay,
And
so I guess again, I'm just trying to, because this is the first time I think we've worked from this Word document this way. Can you explain, if you go across the board with it, you have here non-homeless special needs, and then if I keep going, you've got public service activities other than low moderate income housing benefits. So can you explain how they fill all the way across here?
a public service need. Okay, assist public service providers. So we're assisting public service providers. And that's basically just saying that they are providing, there are a variety of public services. There's health services, it could be a senior service, it could be a food service. So public service is just a general category. But based on what we received as applications, this top category that you're looking at, the top of this Excel spreadsheet, are the public service agencies that applied. And this particular Dare to Dream is a youth program oriented type service. So they will provide enrichment learning services to students or just young people. And the reason that I recommended funding this is because I think, especially during this time when we don't know if children are going to be able to go to school or how they're going to be able to interact during this pandemic, that some of these enrichment programs may be able to work with children in a different way than the school would. You know, like if they're in a virtual atmosphere for school, maybe there's some social distancing and some other aspects to approach learning that these organizations can do. And it is on the north, I believe it's on the north side of Youngstown. So I was, just concerned about the impact that a program like this could potentially have on the children and youth that need this type of service, particularly in our current environment.
Thank you, Beverly. And I actually, and you did bring up a good point regarding the dynamics now with COVID. So that actually makes me, I guess, even more curious to see their application and how they are going to try to achieve their goals. Because of social distancing, I don't believe that, you know, people can meet together. So how they're planning to do this virtually and how, you know, they're, I mean, I guess what, you know, what their plans are regarding that. But Julius had his hand up. Go ahead, Councilman Oliver.
I guess my question is kind of on the line of like everybody else's questions at this point. So when it comes to deciding who receives funding and who doesn't, so Dare to Dreams organization I'm well aware of. I know they do good work. But then you have, which is, and Dare to Dream is new. They're new and they asked for some money and they were recommended a certain amount. Same thing, you got Youngstown Lifeguard Academy, which I know also is a good program. Not only supplies trained lifeguards to the YMCA, which there's a shortage, to Youngstown City Pools, which there's a shortage. There's a shortage of lifeguards all over the country. So this is a program where you not only get youth out the way, you train them with a skill, and they're able to go get an actual job with that skill anywhere. They were recommended zero. So I'm trying to figure out how, was it their application? Was it because of COVID? Because it's chlorine and water? How these are both new. They're both great for the youth, both youth enrichment. One got zero, one got, how much did Dare to Dream get? 37.5. So how do, and there's plenty of other ones that's zero on here. So again, what was the difference between
So
Academy? And I know it was well written too.
So I think the best thing to do is what we should do is one by one go through each of them, and if whether it's Rufus or Beverly, if you can state the organization, what their scoring was based on, what services they're providing, and then to Councilman McNally's point, to clarify under which of these 10 goals they fit in. And then after that, as we go category by category, I can then ask our committee members where they would like to see adjustments made. I mean, Lauren and Julius, are you good with that? And Samantha, you guys?
That sounds good, but I think also we got to be I think within this scoring process, there's also a who you know scoring there too, which everybody ain't gonna say out loud. But it seems like that's the case year after year when it comes to awarding money. So.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead. And so Dare to Dream was, Rufus kind of went over how they were scored, the way they were, and Beverly mentioned what category they're under. So let's move on to Flying High, and then once we get to the bottom of the public well, I guess all these are public services. We'll go ahead and make suggestions, Lauren and Julius, where we would like to see adjustments to bring before the rest of council. So go ahead, Flying High, if somebody can talk about that, please.
Through the chair, Flying High, you see they requested $821,848. And we were only able to fund 60,000. And I will give you the logic behind that. It's not any opinion or personal. It is strictly fact that we can, let me back up and say first that I believe the applicant thought of his project as an economic development project. But after reading the application myself, and with all of us reviewing the application, It is actually a public service that he is intending to offer. And based on that, there are other guidelines in public service. The reason we, the large gap between what he requested, Jeff Magada, and what we are recommending, simply because if we fund a public service, there are particular guidelines, and also there's a 15% cap. We are only permitted to use 15%, up to 15% of our annual CDBG allocation for public services. And what we did in order to at least consider flying high is looked at two components, particular components in his application, that he had two contracted service providers that are new to his program that would enhance the program, UMADOC and MyCap, that would be providing services to this. This is a job skill program and job placement program. So there's plenty of wraparound services in it where the Flying High program is trying to get young people job prepared for the different jobs that come up. Let's say there's a welding job, or there's a nursing job, but these young people maybe don't have a car, they don't have a license, they have a drug problem or something like that. So this program is actually preparing these people to be able to get into the workforce, qualify for a job, and eventually keep that job, retain that job, and be able to make a better life. So we were only able to provide a recommended amount of $60,000 based on the other applications that we thought should be recommended under the public service category.
Quick question. Because I was looking in my email, but it's not loading. Were we sent the awarded amounts for last year? Does anybody know? Because I can't tell if we were or not. My file isn't loading. And then I guess my question would be, so is this a new organization, or were they awarded money last year?
This is a new applicant.
Okay. And can somebody answer, did we receive the funding for last year? Do you guys know? No. Okay. Okay, I guess for now we can move on to Heart Reach Neighborhood Ministries. And of those things that I mentioned that we would like to hear, if somebody could, if you guys could also let us know if it's a new applicant and if they were awarded last year, please.
Through the chair, they were not awarded last year. They did not apply last year.
Okay. And this is for Heart Reach Ministries?
Yes.
Okay, and then go ahead, you can go over how the decision was kind of based at what the recommendation was and what merit was used for their scoring and what services they that they are anticipating to provide.
The basic merit was an overall type of services they provide, and theirs is a program where they cater to the needs of children and Youngstown, and they also have children from Campbell and so forth. So our focus is on the children in Youngstown. So it's a tutoring, enrichment program. They have meals for these children and so forth. So it's more or less, it could be an after school or a summer program. So they do both. And the reason for the amount is because, again, we wanted to fund them. We could not fund them fully. And so I had to think of a middle ground that would not be just enough money to not do anything. Sometimes if you fund an organization below a certain amount, you're just giving them enough to not be successful. So let's say, for example, we funded them 5,000 instead of 15, then that $5,000 might not be enough to make any type of significant impact. But looking at all of the aspects of the application, including staff, overall budget, overall types of services they're proposed to provide, their record, their financial audits and so forth, that we just reached a number that we thought that they could do a sufficient service to the children, have a sufficient impact, it's maybe not a maximum impact. But again, because we only have that $476,000 to work with, and 200 of it is already, 275 is already going to city departments. So we had to just come up with a number that we believed would be sufficient, that this organization would not just be using funding for nothing and not providing any type of impact, to choosing a number that we said, well, based on their budget, based on what they do, the services they provide, we could fund them so they could at least take care of part of their program budget to provide services, much needed services to children in the community.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Home for Good.
Home for Good.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Home for Good is a reentry program. It is the only one that we have that applied. And they also, one of the important factors about Home for Good is that they actually also collaborate with the Flying High program, you know, as far as helping persons who are coming back into the public after being incarcerated.
So is this, for clarification, so is this a new applicant? And if it is not, were they awarded money last year?
They were awarded funding last year, the same exact amount.
And did they go through their funding, like through their money, or do they, go ahead.
I would like to defer to Rufus on that, please.
Yes, they did. They used their funds and they used them in a very appropriate manner.
Okay. Okay, so for this one, we deemed for them to be recommended this amount based on their score, correct? Yes.
Their score, as well as their ability to carry out the mission that they said that they were going to do, the number of units served that they projected that they would do, they exceeded that number. And so all of those were factors used to recommend them to be funded this year.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Inspiring Minds.
Rufus, I'd like to defer to you for
Sure.
these. Mm-hmm.
Inspiring Minds is an enrichment program for youth on the south side of Youngstown. They were awarded funds last year. They were very successful in their use of the funds that they were awarded. I would recommend them again this year based upon their track record, based upon their ability to carry out the programs that they said that they were looking to do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moving on to Oak Hill Collaborative.
Oak Hill Collaborative was looking to establish a community center within their building there on Oak Hill. I didn't think that what they were doing was something that was essential or even tied anywhere remotely with any of our goals. The other thing is we have had difficulties with them in the past with compliance issues. They refuse to provide financials. And so they have been a very difficult applicant.
Okay, thank you. Oka,
OKA, once again, OKA is an established organization. The runs youth enrichment programs throughout the year for our Hispanic residents. They have a very good track record. They use their funds effectively. They are involved in a lot of multicultural events and programs, enrichment programs for our Hispanic clientele for the city of Youngstown. They're the only applicant that caters specifically to the needs of our Hispanic community.
thank you. Ohio Urban Renaissance,
Ohio Urban Renaissance was looking to run youth enrichment programs at 421 and a half the Buckeye Elks building. They are not a new applicant. This would be their first year of funding. This organization falls under the same category as the Dare to Dream, looking to fund some new organizations. So that was pretty much the criteria there. But they had applied in the past. They were not successful in receiving any funds. So the recommendation is, you know, it would be difficult for them to carry out the programming that they're saying, because they are leasing space within the Buckeye Elks right now. And some of the things that they were looking to do should be in a building that they are owning themselves, as opposed to merely leasing.
quick question. You said that they were going to be providing services for children, like they, like kind of, is that what you said, like a mentorship or?
Well, actually, their application was from youth all the way up to adults. It was all over the board as far as the types of services that they were looking to offer. It wasn't very focused. It wasn't very succinct. It was basically offering services to everybody for everything.
Julius has a question, but quick comment. I think, and I'll just reiterate again, that it's important for us to have these applications as well. So that way, I guess we can either determine if you know, if we feel the same way or if we don't feel the same way. Julius, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are we sure they're leasing the space, or is it a lease to own, or are they actually purchasing the youth center?
They can't purchase the Buckeye Elks facility is not for sale. So they cannot purchase it. I'm a trustee at the Elks. That building is not for sale. They can lease only, but they can never purchase it.
Okay, I was under the impression it was for sale.
Well, once again,
As a trustee, I was under the impression it was for sale.
as the information that I have access to, the building cannot be sold.
Okay.
Okay. The Smart Students Motivated by the Arts.
This is a program that had been previously funded for many years. Once again, this year, different focus, it's hard to measure impact. The results have been minimal as far as output. You're concerned about output. The results have been minimal from this program. And so I can understand if you only have a limited amount of funds and you have to cut back somewhere, this might be one that you would want to look at because of impact.
Through the chair.
Yes, go ahead, Julius.
I'm just I'm just perplexed sometimes at how these choices are being made. I know that Smarts is a really impactful organization. I'm familiar with Becky Keck and her work. I don't know if anybody's ever visited the Smart Center and seen what they actually do and the manner of children they produce and how it helps them in their schoolwork moving forward. But it's organizations like this that just boggle my mind. Like how does Smarts not get considered like anything? Not $10. You know what I mean? It's like, how does that happen? It's just a comment. You know what I mean?
Through the chair, I'm
Yes.
very familiar with the Smarts program. My wife used to work there for Becky. So I'm very familiar with what they do. But once again, when you're looking at our HUD goals and the objectives that we're trying to reach, they just did not have very much of an impact on those areas.
But there's new organizations with no impact at all that got funding instead of an organization that has little impact.
Through the chair, may I address that, please?
Go ahead, Beverly.
Yes, one of my concerns.
Sorry to cut you off, Samantha. I'm sorry. I didn't. I'm sorry.
Yeah, one of my.
Go ahead, Beverly. I'll ask after.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. One of my concerns through this process is it almost seems as though if we don't fund someone, there's an issue, and if we do, there's an issue. So we have to be just objective. And I do have a concern with, and I understand your points in wanting to read the entire application, but sometimes when you read the application, I think it may just cause additional questions that will never resolve because you're looking from one perspective and possibly, and then we're looking from different perspectives. Because when as HUD puts it, see, that application is actually considered the first step in our monitoring process. So the monitoring process being as complex as it is, we do have to not opinionize the application, but we do have to scrutinize it in a different manner and come at it and look at it in a different perspective. So when I'm looking personally, when I'm looking at an application, I'm thinking I'm not thinking about my opinion. I'm looking at facts, pure facts, that this application is new, perhaps, but if reading every sentence in that application shows me potential, then it is my obligation to perhaps give that organization a chance. And I know in the past, council has kind of chastised us for not choosing different applications, for funding an application over and over again. And so we have to kind of meet in a middle ground, and HUD doesn't expect us either to fund organizations over and over again. They expect us to perhaps help an organization to, just like you mentioned for the city, to seek other funding so that they can wean off of this funding, which is considered gap funding. And so
Beverly, if I may interject, I think what the concern is, and I mean, I agree with you. If you're, your guys' department expertise is going over these applications and knowing what HUD is looking for. But I think the greater concern that lies with council is that it seems that the metrics are not uniform. They always differ based on an organization. And although I will agree, we do have to give new organizations a chance, but I think to Councilman Oliver's point, as in this particular situation, the SMARTS program is already established and they do meet all of their goals and do a great job. So it's just, I guess we're having a hard time understanding why they were not awarded anything, but such a large substantial of money is being awarded to organizations that just have potential in what they wrote versus their actions. Is that, Julius? I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, you hit it dead on. I think Samantha had her hand up, though.
Oh, thank you. And then Samantha, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but there's a couple of different organizations, but let's since we're talking about smarts, I don't know if you're including in the matrix, and even if I guess would say for Ohio Urban Renaissance as well, these organizations not only provide services to young minority children in the city of Youngstown, they've also invested in infrastructure, in upgrading buildings and spaces and beautification and everything. So I think that is same to Basha, Councilman Basha Adams-Zach's point, is that the matrix as to how we're making the decision, not just based off of their programming, but also their investment into the community, is what I'm trying to see. And then and what also is confusing to me is that programs that we aren't clear, and no offense, Mr. Hudson, is that we weren't clear exactly on where they were in their new program being funded. Getting all of that information, it just would be helpful, because I feel like I'm all I'm doing is taking what you're telling me, and I don't have anything tangible to kind of go back on. I would like to see SMART's numbers, if they have received dollars in the past, and those are things that we can see. I at least 15 kids that I know have participated in SMARTs and or does participate in SMARTs, and that's just the kids that I know. I know that they're involved in schools, so I would like to see their data and what that looks like and how many children they serve in the city of Youngstown. And that goes for anyone that has been previously funded or those that have been doing program and this is their first year being funded. So I think there's a good amount of information that we're missing that could probably help us be clear on your process, Beverly, and how you're making this decision. That's all I just wanted to say, because it's the same questions are coming back and we're missing a gap of information to make a sound recommendation.
Directly related to what you're saying, Samantha, it seems as though the email that we received, based on the email, that SMARTS received $10,000 last year. So did they not meet their objective goals and not spend their $10,000 as they planned to? And that's why we then decided not to potentially award them money this year, because based on this, they were awarded $10,000. So did they not spend it wisely?
Through the chair, they always spend their money wisely. So that's not the whole picture though, but we had to make choices simply because, and a lot of our determination is based on the fact that we cannot go over that 15%. In fact, these numbers, I believe, is 12%, simply because we have to watch that percentage throughout the year based on when these organizations draw their funds, that during a particular fiscal year, we cannot draw down over 15% of those funds. So it's an overall. So that's, and I understand exactly what each of you is saying, but again, internally, we have different measures and different aspects that we have to look at just to make these recommendations. So these are recommendations based on facts that we have. And like I stated earlier, it's not necessarily saying that this particular organization did not present a good application or did not meet certain guidelines. We just sometimes, because of the limited resources, we have to maybe say, well, this organization, Dare to Dream, just as an example, not as me pushing for it, but as an example that we will need to give another organization an opportunity to present an impact within the city. If we don't give them the opportunity, we will never know. They've applied before.
I see
They're
you.
to-
I'll
Yes,
call on you in 1 moment. Rufus. Actually, do you know what? And Beverly, I want to interject quickly and then let Rufus speak and then Julius. And actually, you're right. This is this is just a recommendation. I mean, and that's why we have this checks and balances in place that the committee can then make suggestions where we would like to see, money, moved around to then present to the rest of our colleagues. So I think even after we get through this, after this meeting, I think it's important for us to see the full application, just as you're able and determine your, metrics and your, I guess, recommendations based off of the full application. I feel we need to be able to do the same, so that way we can adequately either, completely agree or be able to make those adjustments as necessary. So then even at the end of this meeting, I mean, we'll take our other, well, Samantha's online, get Samantha's suggestions, and then we as a committee can then decide where we want to move funding around. But Rufus, go ahead. You had a comment, and then Julius.
Yeah, they were awarded 10,000 last year. They still have 5,000 that's unspent. So for them to ask for 24.9 when they had a hard time spending 10, to me, that's a stretch.
Julius, thank you, Rufus.
So I know Smarts dealt with the majority of students from Youngstown. Just because now I'm just going off y'all in the past, just because somebody still has money that they didn't draw down from the previous year, I've never heard it as they had a hard time spending it. I haven't heard they just didn't draw down for that particular year, blah, blah, blah. Now this organization has had a hard time spending.
through the chair.
I'm not done.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Another thing I heard, and this is just why this gets really confusing, and it starts to look like something's going on that's not being presented to us. Now, is Flying High leasing space? Somebody can answer that.
Yeah, based on their application, where are they located and going to be providing their services? Flying High.
Because they're both in the Chase building downtown and over on the north side somewhere. But do they own that property, or are they leasing space? Because leasing space was part of the criteria why Urban Renaissance couldn't get funded. So I'm just trying to make clarifications here. If it disqualifies or qualifies one, how doesn't it work across the board? And if we're gonna go with the criteria of somebody had a hard time spending, then how do we continually fund organizations that always have extra drawdown in the next year coming? I mean, I think we funded, what was the people that was in the library that never spent their money, and we still gave them money year after year. It was still recommended.
Through the chair, though, may I interject, though, that some of those organizations that were eventually funded, we did not recommend funding for them, but someone else did make a decision to fund them since we didn't have a final decision on that. I believe you're speaking of St. Augustine Cafe, yes, and I had highly recommended against funding, that organization again. And there's a difference between having money left at the end of the year and not being able to spend the money or not spending it wisely. So there's a lot involved in, because we don't deny someone just because they have funding left. So that's not a fact.
Chair, this is my 5th year. All right. Every year, organizations have money that they didn't draw down.
Yes.
And it's never been a disqualifying factor. So that's what I'm saying. So how there is a clear inconsistency here. And it needs to be cleared up. Like, do we go off a scoring system, application, or do we go off of who somebody strongly recommends get funding? How does this really work? Because this, at 5 years, it's getting real frustrating. because it's not across the board equitable. It's not. So even if we went down the line and gave each organization $10,000, that seemed like that would be more equitable than what's going on right now.
Nikki, if you can address that, please.
Through the chair, and this is my first year through this whole budget process, so I'm taking notes as we go in things that I know we can improve on and things that are HUD regulated. With regard to money being left on the table and money carried over from the previous year, in the conversations with the consultant on the calls that we've had, as well as the community and stakeholder meetings, the consultants made it clear that if you have money left over from a previous year, now having money left over from a previous year because you just didn't spend it yet, or you have programming that's planned for it, that's different than not having the ability to spend it. And maybe you've been awarded, $50,000 and you've only spent $5,000 or $10,000 early on in that fiscal year, and you've not made any progress.
Is the fiscal year for the spending over now at this point?
They're on the state fiscal year, so that starts today.
So
No, I think what he's asking, are you asking if they're still able to spend down the money that was awarded last year?
Yeah, is that fiscal cycle over?
They can still spend that money. What the consultant made clear.
That's what I'm saying. How is them not spending the money part of the criteria then? If it's not even the time ain't even up yet.
What I'm saying, Councilman, is not spending the money and not having the ability or having the programming or the process in place. What is the plan for spending? Having money sitting there and having a plan for it being allocated is different. So if the money is encumbered and allocated to be spent on some programming, that's different than having the money sitting there and I don't know what to do with it yet. I haven't figured it out. Those are the differences that they have to weigh. With regard to Flying High, they're looking for space to purchase in the city to be a workforce development hub. So they may be leasing now, but he's looking
right now.
Yes, that is correct.
But Nikki, so through the chair, I apologize. I don't want to be disrespectful. Do you see our discrepancy? Do you see where that's just two things? The leasing of space that's disqualified somebody and not drawing down funds when the fiscal year ain't even over to draw down the funds yet, that disqualifies somebody. But do you see where we're getting at here?
I understand because
One second, Nikki. I think what is going to need to be done is, and I'm not sure what, I don't have it in front of me, what the deadline is to have this, done and approved by council. But I think we need to see, other than the applications, how the determination was made for each organization and in their particular situation, what was deemed beneficial and what was deemed as a hindrance, because that's where it's kind of becoming an issue. Certain things that are hindering one organization is a benefit for another. So it's not uniform across the board. And I think that's what we would like to see to then be able to determine how to, change any allocations that need to be made.
Mm-hmm. Through the chair, and if I could just make one last comment before we move on. It can't be across the board. It can't be across the board because each objective is different for what they're proposing to us. Each need is different. Each impact is different. So we have to base them, when Beverly and Rufus are making the decisions, they're basing it on the impact and the scope that applicant provided. So it can't be across the board. And I do agree, yes, you don't have enough information in front of you to make the educated decision that you need. So again, I'm jotting down notes and processes that we can internally change to make it easier and smoother. But remember too, this was a extreme consolidated process. So, and as well as, the challenge of it all being electronic and the consultant and all of this going to NIGIS and just pushing out information, all of the information is here, it is available. And then we'll see to it at the end of this presentation that you have it all so that you can make the best educated decision based on these recommendations that can be changed.
Nikki, just a comment, and because I am taking under consideration that this is your first time going through this process, and I understand due to, COVID and other things, we are I guess, more on a pressed timeline. However, I believe my colleagues' frustrations lie in that for some of us, now this is the 5th year, some of us, this is the 1st year, we've been asking for the same information. I've had the same concerns year after year, and nothing, in a sense, I don't say nothing, but things are not changing. And I do understand, based on the needs of, or I guess what each organization is trying to solve, the metric would be slightly different. So again, I will say that it's important for us to have what the department used to, to determine that. Otherwise, it's very arbitrary, and it seems, and it appears, even if this is not the intent, it appears very opinion based.
Okay, understood.
Okay, thank you. If we can then move on to YNDC Mineral Springs.
Excuse me, through the chair.
Oh, Anita, hi, I'm sorry.
Yes, hi. I just want to, I'm off camera because I'm at a doctor's office now. I just wanted to know if I was present. That's all.
Oh, okay, thank you. Samantha?
Real quick, thank you through the chair. From what date to what date was the application, did people have to turn in this application? When was the application period? I missed that, and unless you mentioned it.
Through the chair, I believe that we were on a, maybe I would call it a fast track application process. Typically, we offer the application in January, and we have our public meeting that you were at in January, and then this COVID stuff happened and so forth. And so the application, I believe, was due in May.
It was due in May, or was it like just?
I don't have that note in front of me, but it was, they had 3 weeks to get the application done. I believe it was due. Typically they have 4 weeks, and this year we only had 3 weeks to get it done because of the different issues with not only COVID. We had to change from having applications turned in hard copy to turned in virtual by email and so forth. So we had a lot of changes. We had to change the whole process and change the guidelines and so forth. So once we did that, the applications were sent to me via email, and they were all turned in during the month of May.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question. How was the public made aware that the applications were now being, open?
There's public notice. We issued a public notice, and plus I sent all the original applicants that already had subrecipient agreements. So there was a public notice sent out via email and posted on the city's website.
Okay, so that's what I was gonna ask. So
yes.
Previous applicants received an email that we had on file, and everybody else, it was just on the city's website.
Yes, and it's posted as a public notice, yes.
Thank you.
And we had the public meeting also. So there was just a slight changes due to suddenly having to leave the office in March.
Thank you through the chair. Just right now, like an active comment that I got, and because it's streaming, is this, they don't even know what this meeting is about because they didn't get the notice and have applied in the past, and it was like, and of course we all know, I'm sure all of us here know that this is a monster of an application. So I don't know what I think we need to also, while we're making that address, is how we ensure that organizations across the city get ample time, get information. I know it was accelerated due to COVID, but I just got like 3 comments on the feed about this particular process, and other organizations feeling like they didn't have the opportunity to even, apply for this funding. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and through the chair, I just wanted to make a note that this is the first time we received that type of comment about organizations saying they didn't have the opportunity to apply. So I just wanted to make note of that.
And that's understandable, Beverly, because of the
Yes.
condensed timeline
Yes.
and COVID. But it's just, you know, people are
Yes.
like, hey, we usually have, this is more robust. We hear this information, and they just felt like this time it was really off. And that was honestly because of what we're going in our current affairs.
And I
Thank you.
think, I think also, I mean, as important as this funding is and how impactful it is, I know when we set the budget in general, I'm talking about the city budget in the beginning of the year, most departments are allocated a marketing budget. I think that the CDBG funding is so important that perhaps in the future, I mean, there needs to even be a commercial or some kind of mailer done to inform all of the city and residents, you know, that the application process is occurring so we can better, I guess, you know, meet the needs of the city. But if we can now move on to YNDC Mineral Springs.
YNDC Mineral Springs was a project to replace curbs and sidewalks in one census tract over on Mineral Springs and a couple of adjoining streets by YNDC. This project, they're planning on doing some housing, build some new housing over in that same census tract 44511. To me, to put the curbs and sidewalks in ahead of the housing was putting the cart before the horse, because if you're going to be bringing in heavy equipment, you would have to cross over newly installed sidewalks. And so it just seemed like the sequencing this year for that project was out of line, that you would want to put your housing in first and then put in your curbs and sidewalks after the project is completed, not before.
Thank you. Rufus. Julius?
So in the process of building a house, I know because I'm building one right now. A house can go up depending on how complex it is in a matter of months. And then once that house is finished, regardless of whether the equipment is moving back and forth, then you can put in the sidewalks and curbs right after. You only need the heavy equipment to dig out the foundation. After that, the heavy equipment pretty much goes away. You can put in the sidewalk at the same time as landscaping and lawns. So again, it's just I'm confused. I don't understand how we choosing.
Did you want a response from someone, or are you just making a comment?
I guess I'm just making a comment because I ain't got a clear answer to nothing yet. So it's a comment.
Okay, thank you. If we could move on to the Youngstown Lifeguard
Through
Academy.
the chair.
Yes.
Excuse me, through the chair. Yes, through the chair to Rufus. You said that the sequence was not correct. When is their building date and the expected completion date from YNDC?
None of that has been provided.
So how could that determination be made that the sequence is out of?
Exactly, out of whack.
Well, once again, we have not been provided any detail as to when, the actual construction was going to start.
Through the chair, so
Anita?
have you asked them for additional information?
That's what I was gonna ask. Go ahead.
Well, once again, no. The only thing that we have is the application that has been presented to us regarding the project. The ask for the sidewalks, the curbs and sidewalks.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Just another comment, and this is another organization that has been successful in doing what they said they would do. Just a comment.
Through the chair.
Yes, Anita.
Yes, so in the normal circumstances, wouldn't you inquire of the applying agency for that information? To Rufus?
I didn't get the question. I didn't understand the question.
under normal circumstances, if that information was missing, you know, their startup date, and working with the agencies, wouldn't you be asking them for that information, their start date and things like that?
I think if they were awarded the money, we would certainly be monitoring it from that point on. But this is just the application process.
Okay.
So I have to go by what was presented.
Anita, because I can't see we can't see you. Did you have a follow-up?
No, I would holler. I do apologize, but like I said, I'm in a doctor's office, so I'm being discreet.
Thank you. If we could move on to the Youngstown Lifeguard Academy. Would anybody like to speak on the Youngstown Lifeguard Academy, or are we just?
Through the chair, Rufus, are you speaking,
Yes.
please?
Yes. Youngstown Lifeguard Academy. The application was not in line with any of our HUD goals and guidelines, and it really would not have benefited the city in the use of those funds, because the program itself was not beneficial, or would not hit any of our national objectives.
Rufus, do you have the application by chance in front of you? Or-
No, they were all online, so they were all
Okay, or
submitted electronically, so I don't have them in front of me.
Maybe either you or Beverly, you guys, or do you guys remember what their objective was?
What their objective was?
Yes.
The objective was to, I believe, provide lifeguard training for some individuals.
Through the chair.
And I get, I mean, this is kind of more so comment, and that doesn't, I get, and I would never, go ahead, Julius.
So through the chair, question is how doesn't this fall directly in line with youth enrichment? Same with, like, you know, it's training youth. It wasn't particular individuals. It's a very large program that's been successful in different cities across the country. It is implemented by Mr. Tarpley, I think. It involves as many youth that would get involved with the program to train them to be, like I said, skilled lifeguards that could be employed at not only cities facilities, but YMCAs, which there's a shortage already, and there's a shortage of lifeguards across the country. So it's like Flying High was preparing you for jobs, Dare to Dream, youth enrichment. How does it not fall in the same categories as those organizations? Like nowhere.
Through the chair,
Jobs or youth.
Really?
through the chair, yes, I can make a comment on that. And it does have meaning, and it is a service similar to what you could categorize under the Flying High. But again, because of the limited resources, then we do have to make choices though. So I'm not saying this is going to be the end choice, but it was recommended. Flying High was just happened to be recommended over. And again, I'm not saying that the Youngstown Lifeguard Academy, whose program budget was, or their ask was $227,325, that if we had to take that all the way down to 15,000 or less, then the 27 lifeguards that they intended to train I don't know if that is even suitable to them as far as meeting any of their impactful goals. So that's something that, of course, I understand why you question it. But, you know, they requested 227, 325, and their total budget, project budget, is $479,000. So I just feel as though, or the fact is 47% would be asked for through CDBG. And I don't understand how, you know, one of the questions that HUD would ask, well, how are you going to meet your goal if you're not funded by CDBG?
Just quick comment, and then Julius, and that I would assume that their budget is so high based on the amount of you know, children or youth they are planning on serving. But even if they could only, you know, serve, you know, whatever, 5, 6, 10 children, I think it's beneficial. Last year, we did a similar program through our Parks Department that we as council funded, helped fund through our discretionary, and that showed to be very beneficial. And I think this is kind of how this Youngstown Lifeguard Academy came to fruition, to be able to meet that need of what was a successful program. Julius?
Yes.
You said exactly what I was going to say. And that's why I was confused, because it seemed like it was language being used, disqualifying language being used. So we know where the foundation of this program came from. We are aware of the benefits that it could have, not only in taking, you know, children off the street, getting them out the way, but giving them an actual skill that they get paid from, producing jobs. But you said yourself, it's 27 people that it's going to affect, 27 kids. But earlier I heard like it was just certain individuals, like it was going to be just some cats, like.
Okay.
27, through the chair, 27 individuals out of 227 for 200 and something $1,000. That's a very high cost per unit of service. That's another factor.
Through the chair.
Lifeguards.
Anita?
Yes, I was gonna, actually, Rufus kind of echoed my thoughts, which was the cost per child is awfully high. And additionally, for a whole lot less, we have the Jewish Community Center and the YMCA that will also train our lifeguards when we could, you know, for an awful lot less. And sometimes they've even done it for free. But the $200,000+ to train 27 people, you put that in your calculator and you're realizing that we're paying for a lot of staff, not for training other kids, not going to the kids themselves. That's for staffing. That's wages.
And yeah, Anita, I get, yeah,
we had a presentation from them. And we had a presentation, if you remember, at the park. I think it was through the park. It might have been through Parks and Rec. Samantha, you might be able to expound upon this. But they did a presentation. And they gave us their packet, and so much of that cost was dealing with staffing as well, and not just for the actual training of the kids.
And that's what I was going to ask, and that regarding seeing, that's why it's important to see the applicants and their applications, see what the, you know, funding is going towards. Julius?
That's what I was going to say. You'd have to see the application. I know y'all sat through a presentation, but in an academy, this is going to go far beyond just training kids for lifeguarding, which is an extensive program in itself. But it's an academy. The staff is who's going to be training these kids. You know what I mean? It's needed. It's necessary in my sight. You know what I mean? But that's besides the point. I'm just saying it's another organization that has the potential to have a great impact on our youth and our city, and it still got zero. That's my point.
I'm going to interject for a second, because we still have a lot of applications. Well, I guess, you know, things to go through, as well as another agenda item. if we can, I guess, continue going down the list, and can somebody tell me what is the deadline that this needs to be approved and submitted?
Through the chair.
Yes.
Okay, now, we do have a bit of time. We need to get all of the final decisions back to the consultant
Mhm.
by July 15th. Okay, so the draft of the plans are actually going to be on display, public display,
Mhm.
from July 1st to August 1st. So during that time, I'd already spoken with Valencia about the timeline, and I don't have it in front of me, about the timeline that CPED could decide, well, we need to meet again and so forth.
Yeah, that, and I'm sorry,
yeah.
that we can figure out with the committee when we can meet. What I'm trying to get is a date that this needs to be passed in order
It has to
guidelines, so HUD guidelines.
According to the guidelines, after August 1st, but by August 5th.
Okay, that's what okay. So what it seems like what's going to need to happen is after this meeting, once we get through this list, we're going to need to get all the information that we're asking for. So that way we have time to look it over, and we're probably going to need another meeting. So that way we can make adjustments where they are needed. But I guess for now, if we could move on to the Youngstown Promise neighborhoods.
Youngstown Promise neighborhoods, the Taft Promise neighborhoods is some of the other funding that they had received over a couple years. This is once again, a youth enrichment, community engagement program right around the Taft neighborhood. That's where their focus is on that part of the South Side.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Yes.
So that we get through this list and so forth, would it be okay for us just to really consider the fact that these are recommendations and that you do have the opportunity to disagree on them, and so that we don't focus so much on scoring and so forth, that you really recognize that we did do this in a fair and non-opinionated way, and that now it is up to you as a committee to look at this and decide that you don't agree with our recommendations and make your own recommendations on this, so that we don't just kind of battle back and forth about how we reached this. Because the main thing that I can say is that we did it in as fair and as equitable manner as we possibly could, based on what we read and in the application and on our monitoring and all the other factors that it takes a year for us to establish regarding these previous applicants, and just an application to make some type of recommendation on a new applicant. So if we could move forward based on just that, I think we could get through it, because I don't think today we're going to agree on the that we did not just throw our opinions in this. So I just like for us to, get through it, and then you all can, we will send you additional information as you requested.
Okay, I agree. So I think if the CDA department can kind of write down what information we're going to need to be able to make adjustments and recommendations. If we could get the applications, and whether if you guys want to leave, paper documents with our clerks, or if we could receive those electronically, and how the determination was made, because we do value your expertise. At the end of the day, you guys are the ones that work with this, every day. So we can kind of gauge and understand how you got to your determination. And like I said, that's including what was beneficial in the applications and what posed as a hindrance. So that way we can compile all that information, we can then go over it, have another meeting, and then make adjustments. Samantha, go ahead.
I would also like to see the if they were funded last year, the reports, even if it's the last quarter report that they submitted for last year, to because I understand, as Rufus said, that you utilize that as well. So I would like to see those as well.
Julius.
I just want to say for the record, through all the inconsistencies that have been pointed out, I can't say that the decisions were made fair and equitable. I understand that we got to go through this and put money where it needs to be or it should be, whether that means taking from one organization and giving to someone else. But there's way too many inconsistencies for me to believe that these decisions were fair and equitable across the board.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, if we could get, if we can get that information to us as soon as possible, because with, you know, a deadline here and with you guys wanting to get a document over to the consultants by July 15th, we're going to need this information kind of sooner than later. So, I mean, does anybody have any questions regarding the rest of this list, or we could revisit it once we get all of the supplemental information that we need? So can we go ahead, Samantha?
Just my other question was, I see that the majority of the city services were funded at capacity, with the exception of the Parks Department. Is there a percentage that we reinvest back into the city with these dollars, and a percentage that needs to go out into the community? It just seems like it's heavy on money coming into us, into our city operations. Can you explain that to me?
Go ahead. Who would like to answer that?
Through the chair, Samantha, would you please just repeat the question that you have? Is it concerning just the park, or is it concerning the city departments?
It's concerning the city departments. I was just saying that all of the city recommendation or their requests have been funded at capacity. I was just saying, with the exception to the park, but they still receive funding. What's the percentage of money that we receive from HUD, we reinvest back into our operations, and what percentage goes out into the community, or how's that determination made?
Okay. Now, as far as the city community police program, the $200,000 is used to support the actual officers. The litter control program is typically used partially for salary and partially for cameras and different aspects of the program to help address litter problems like tires and different things in different areas of the city. The City of Youngstown Fire Department, these are asks, all of these asks are directly from Kyle. That the 120,000 is for a fire truck lease program and sometimes equipment. The capital improvements for the park department, we did not have enough funding to fund the total $500,000 ask. The 750 for the street department, that has been an annual request for CDBG gap funding. And then the 210,299 off to the far right column, there was not an ask for that specifically, but that was the balance left after funding everything else that Kyle had asked for, and setting aside fundings because fire chief had possibly wanted to do some improvements to a fire station. So there's no particular project for that yet, but that is funding that is currently just set aside for that particular type of project.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Anita. And then
yes,
Orsa, go ahead.
Oh, Sam, I'm sorry, Sam, but
No,
you have
go
a follow-up?
I did. So, thanks for explaining that. But my question is, what percentage of this funding that we receive is set aside to be used internally, and what percentage is to go out into the community? And also, if you want to add in, what percentage is for administrative fees?
When you
So-
say internally, Samantha, it is, it all goes out to the city. Because the street resurfacing program, is that what you're asking? I don't
No, I don't
understand
think,
exactly
no,
what
I
you're
don't think
asking.
we understand that all of this funding is used for community and benefit, but she is asking what percentage of the money is being administered by the city versus what is being now administered and given to organizations outside of City Hall. Is that kind of what you mean, Smith?
Okay, well, most of it now, the community police, they administer all of their funding.
That's city, that's internal, but that's what she's asking. So what percentage is given to, in a sense, the city, as in the city of Youngstown City Hall, versus what's going to nonprofits, I guess.
Okay, it is what you see there, that whole 1,555,886 goes to the city. Well, except for the cityscape, the 120,000 and the 5587. So fire department, capital improvements for the park, and street department improvements, and the funding that's set aside for the future fire station improvements goes to the city. And it is an activity in combination with general funds. It's an,
just a direct follow-up. So is there a HUD specific guideline as to how we put those funds out? Because, you know, some of this stuff is in our budget. This is in addition to our budget. I'm assuming, I don't know if Cal's on the call, but what I'm trying to surmise is, how do we say this much is going to go into city operations and how we do things as a city during in our city government, and this is how much we're going to put out into the community to have nonprofit organizations make an impact on our citizens. I might be, I don't know if I'm asking that clearly, but
I don't understand your question quite, but I can say that they're not operation dollars. We have an agreement with the city, and the city contributes funds to the street resurfacing program, and CDBG contributes, and they use contractors to provide the services.
So the city departments can essentially apply for this funding just like a nonprofit can apply for this funding.
They can apply. They haven't in the past, but that's something that we would like for the city to actually apply for the funding, so that we know ahead of time what their intentions are with the funding, instead of just saying this is what we need from CDBG. Typically,
go ahead, Beverly. Who is that? Is that you, Anita?
Yeah, I'm still waiting to get to get in on this here. Beverly, I do have a couple of questions. Okay, just about Cityscape, was that a separate entity? That is a separate entity from the city of Youngstown.
Yes,
correct?
it is.
Okay, and did they receive funding last year?
Yes, they did.
Okay, so you'll be able to supply us with that dollar amount?
Yes, I can. That was $35,000.
Okay, do they statewide, $90,000 increase?
Okay, through the chair, I can say that this again is a recommendation, and it was based on strategic plans that we've been talking about as a city, different organizations, and working with Nikki, the mayor, and Hunter, and our different planning and so forth, that Cityscape was, and I believe Cityscape was also working with our city park department. So we are intending to use them in a different manner than we did last year with the $35,000 funding.
Okay, I have some more questions for you, but my other question is about the Northeast homeowners, because in previous years, they only got about 25,000, and here they are getting, you're recommending they get 55,000. And yet that 30,000 could easily go to the park.
Yes, now that is something, if you wish to make that recommendation, you may do so.
Oh, I just did.
Yes, and you may make that recommendation with your committee,
Okay,
with the CPED committee, please.
all right.
Did you have another
And,
question, Anita? And then Julius, go ahead, Anita.
no, go ahead, Julius. I got two more, so go ahead, Julius.
I was just gonna say it. I mean, nobody can deny the great work that Cityscape does. I don't even think Youngstown would look the way it looks right now without Cityscape. Cityscape is almost never funded at their recommended amount. So I'm glad to see that they got what they actually, the recommendation was what they requested, even though money still can be moved around. Same thing with Northeast Homeowners Association. I don't think the East Side would look the way the East Side looks when it comes to those beautification projects without that organization. I don't think the youth would be employed or taken out the way for the summer, not getting in trouble, but actually having a job that they get paid from without that organization. So the amount of more work that organization has to do, it justifies the money that's coming in. Again, not that it can't be moved around, but these are two organizations that put their money where their mouth is, and they extend their work beyond the funds they get. So.
Through the chair.
Anita?
Yes, I hear you, Julius, but I also hear that that's your ward and that's your ward. Okay, and that's not 6th Ward, that's not 7th Ward. Okay, and I'm talking about distributing things so that we can all get something, and not just concentrated, because Cityscape, unless they've changed, their focus is downtown. We might get scrapped in other places. And Northeast Homeowners is Northeast. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Again, when the tides rise, all ships rise. These organizations do a great job.
No, say that one.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Julius. Nikki, I know you had your hand up. Would you like to?
I forgot my thought. Thank you, though.
Samantha, did I just see you have your hand up?
Yeah, just to Anita's point, I think that it will be helpful that we get this information out as council people to the other organizations in our ward that we might see doing some great work and could benefit from some additional support. And I think that Councilwoman Adams made this point as well when we talked about the 2-week or 3-week window we had to apply. But if I know, Nikki, you're working on building that plan and how we get this out to the community. So we just probably need to think about that more and ensure that we get some equity across each of the wards, and maybe Hunter can help build on that as well. So, just in the defense.
Thank you, Samantha. Nikki?
Okay, thank you. Just I totally understand and the frustrations and the disagreements to an extent. However, when we first went into this, please keep in mind that we knew we were behind the 8 ball. We knew we were behind the 8 ball. When we had the meeting in January, we said this would have to be an accelerated process. Timelines were going to be shortened. Things weren't going to look the way they did. And again, in my intro, I said COVID threw a wrench at us, so we didn't expect that. That's no excuse. I still want us to be able to look through this objectively, look at the recommendations, come to an agreement so that everyone is satisfied with what's going on in their ward. The public meetings, unfortunately, even the stakeholder meetings were so poorly attended. It was monopolized by the same groups and the same individuals over and over and over. No matter how many times we put the information out there, no matter how many times we sent emails and reminders, they were so poorly attended. And again, we understand that, going from public to in-person meetings to virtual, but that was a better opportunity for it to be more attended, more fully than it had been because it was virtual. But I mean, we were lucky to have 20 people in a session, if 20. Some only had 5 or 10 people in a session, if that. The information went out several times to the departments. I couldn't have screamed it louder at the department meetings to be present. This is important. So this is the result of poor attendance, of acceleration of programs. And I know we do have things to work through, which we're more than willing to do. But just as we go through this and as the frustrations are rising, just keep in mind all of the challenges that went along with it. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. And you're right. I mean, not just for these meetings, but in general, we struggle with poor attendance. That's why maybe we just need to think of other ways to be able to reach our constituency base, whether it's like, I believe it's either Samantha or Julius mentioned, putting things in water bills or even running commercials. I mean, because I know we have, like I mentioned before, marketing funding, just as we put out commercials about COVID. I think it would be really beneficial to put out commercials about this funding because it's very impactful to the whole city. Is there any other questions regarding this budget? Like I said, we're going to have to revisit it once we receive all the information that we need. If not, if we could move on to the 5-year consolidated plan overview, is my committee prepared to move forward? Just shake your head. Yes. Okay. 5-year consolidated plan. Who's going to be speaking on that?
Okay, I actually already said, this is Beverly through the chair.
Thank you.
I had already said everything that I wanted to say about that, but I will repeat that in addition to the annual action plan, which is indicated and recognized on the documents you have in front of you, the city has to do a 5-year plan. And this is, of course, done every 5 years. And it's presented alongside the annual action plan. And the city determines long-term community development needs, priorities, and strategic plan. So this document right now, the draft is done. And it is, I will send you all a copy of that draft for the next committee meeting. And also for the public review. That document, like Rick Deek said, will be placed on the city's website today. It will be there for 30 days. It's a mandated 30-day comment period. And this gives the public the opportunity to send me an email. My email address was in the public notice that was sent out prior. Okay, so the public notice was in the newspaper and it's on the website so that residents, stakeholders, anyone who cares to make a comment can email me that comment or write a letter, however they want to present a comment about that document. And comments will be accepted until August 1st.
Okay, and just for those, if you guys or even residents want to write it down, so the public notice in this document will be available, as Beverly mentioned, on the city website, both under the CPED page, and there's a direct link that says link of public notice. It will be on there as well with, I believe, Beverly, with your contact information, correct? Your contact.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Julius?
Thank you. Through the chair, how does everybody else get this information?
Are you
That is-
referencing if they don't have internet access, can they pick up a copy downtown or something? Is that what you're
Right,
saying?
is there a mailer going out letting people know, like people that don't have internet access, how do they give feedback? People that don't get the paper, because a lot of people don't get the paper anymore. How does the rest of the city residents get this information and give their feedback?
Okay, through the chair, like I said, it's in the newspaper and on the website. Then we send it out to our subrecipient nonprofit agencies also and advise them to please inform their clients, customers, residents, whomever they cater to. And also I'm asking Ian to put it on the YNDC website also, because they have traffic, and to inform their clientele.
Nikki, quick question, because I don't have the departmental budget in front of me. I don't know if there's any money left in marketing, but since this is regarding a 5-year plan, that's going to obviously have long-term effects on the city, can we possibly run an ad on our local news stations to inform people of this plan and to allow them the opportunity to look it over, and either whether they want to look at it online or they can pick up a copy at, at City Hall, so that way we could get direct feedback from our constituency.
Through the chair, yes, we do have some advertising dollars that we could use.
Julius, thank you, Nikki.
I think one of the best ways to get, in touch with people is
The water bill.
Yeah, everybody gets a water bill. If we could put the plan or whatever it is and how you get feedback information, I don't know how much it'd cost us to print, something colorful that'll get people's attention and say, look at this. But we got to make an effort from the city standpoint, not rely on other people or other organizations to get our message out, get it out ourselves. And I think the water bill or what other, any other means that the city have would be very, very good to get that information out.
Through the chair.
Yes, Anita.
Yes, Beverly, do you have copies at the public libraries?
Yes, we sent our other document to the public library, and it will also go on their website.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Anita. Because I guess we're going to move on to the next agenda item, but prior to closing, oh, go ahead, Julius.
Is Nikki, Beverly, Rufus, anybody, is this going to be put in the water bills, or are we going to get this information out to the people? I didn't hear,
Nikki mentioned there are marketing dollars available, so maybe we can see what's more beneficial, whether putting out a commercial on local channels or doing it in the mailer. Nikki, will you kind of visit to see what?
I'll decide which one is the best route to go, whether it's water bill or commercial, or scroll down on the bottom of the TV on the news. We'll look at all three of those options.
And through the chair, we should also, the information, all the call-in information and so forth is in that public notice. So it might be just as advantageous to put a copy of the public notice. It's just one page. It's a one-page document talking about the annual action plan, the consolidated plan, the date of the public meeting, which is July 7th. The call-in information is on there too.
Yeah, and I think that's ideal, just to at least notify people of where they can obtain the information, how to become directly involved. Julius had a follow-up, and then Samantha.
I just want to say we got to get out of the practice of leaving the public out of public planning. We got to involve them any way we can, no matter what it takes, basically. We're planning for them. They got to get input. That's it.
Thank you. Samantha?
I was just going to say, Nikki, if you could add to that list, maybe a social media marketing campaign and the local radio stations, and see if today you could probably get both of those things produced and out to run over the next 30 days. That would, I think, make an impact on our two local stations. So if you could add to the list of possible ways to get out the message and get the information.
Okay, thank you. I believe we're kind of wrapped up regarding the block grant funding for this portion of the meeting. I just want to go over and reiterate. So whether Rufus or Beverly, Nikki, did you guys write down, are you aware of what the committee and my other colleagues are requesting in terms of, the applications, all those things we went over?
Through the chair, may I repeat it back to you to make sure that I have everything?
Yes.
And the application, the scoring form, and I believe Samantha asked for quarterly reports. Now, I don't know if she wants 2019 quarterly reports, because that's all I would have available right now, and I would have to figure out how to get them to her, because those mostly were not submitted through electronically, simply because before they sent a hard copy, because we were still at the office. So that's going to be, rather difficult. Now I can send you a sample of a couple quarterly report forms and so forth that I have here, and maybe some reports, but the quarterly report forms are in the actual hard copy files at our CPED office.
Samantha, if maybe you could clarify what information you're hoping to gain from those reports.
So from those reports, I would like to see if they were previously funded, how they did in the funding. I know they have to submit those reports, and even if it's, you know, to date, the ones you have up till now, that would be helpful for those organizations that have already received funding. So, you know, like the Cityscapes or the Smarts or whomever on your list that has been getting funding in the past, what type of reporting have they done? And I mean, I feel like that would add to the clarity, even if you made a decision not to fund them. If you based it on that information is what they didn't do before, and we can see that, that would help. So I don't know if you guys are not in the office at all. If you're not, or maybe at least the last quarter came in electronically, maybe that would be helpful. That maybe just that last quarter, but I would like to see their last year's reporting.
Yeah, and if there's availability, if it's just in paper document, they could always be scanned, and I'm sure Rick can assist us making them into a file and email them to us. And I also, because I see Julie's just hand up, well, Beverly, did that give some clarity to what Samantha was looking for?
Oh yeah, I knew what she wanted. I
Okay.
just didn't know if it was feasible because I don't have all of them. They're hard copies and in the different various files. CDB, each agency has their individual CDBG file.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then I know, because I'm sorry, Julius, I see your hand up, but I also wanted to mention that Councilwoman Davis requested to, which we did receive in an email. She requested to see the funding that was awarded to the organizations last year, which I do see that it was emailed to us. Julius, go ahead.
I was just wondering, for anybody that can answer the question, are there any unused funds or funds that we don't know about that are left on the table that could be put somewhere? Because I know last year we found out about some money that was sitting around for some years that we didn't know about until last year. So is that the case this year? Is there any additional funds that could be on the table for CDBG that we don't know about?
Through the chair,
Yes.
I think that could be a conversation for another meeting because this year we have not completed, everyone has not completed their funding, and they do have until December 31st to expend their funding. So even though the fiscal year ends, we give them an automatic 6-month extension to expend their funding. And then the other funding that we have is home funding that is still there, but it's earmarked for particular purposes.
Quick question. Last year, the money that we were presented with that was, I guess, not used. What year was that through? Because I don't believe it was completely current. I believe that was through like calendar year, I don't know, like 2015 or 2016. What was, does anybody recall what that cutoff is? Because then what we can do is, I mean, as you mentioned, they have until December to use the money, and then they have the 6-month extension. So maybe we can then look through whatever 2016 through 2018 and then be able to use, you know, to allocate those monies.
Yes, and again, through the chair, a lot of this is that I haven't had the opportunity to look at it as director simply because directly after my appointment, my main priority was cleaning up a few things and getting this consolidated plan done, an annual action plan. So that is a discussion that Nikki and I will have internally. We will look at that and we will make sure that you are aware of what funding is available to be reprogrammed.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we are, as long as everybody is clear, if we could get that information sent to us as soon as possible, preferably really by the end of the week. So then that way we can set up a date to go over that information and have everything submitted to the, you know, consultant and, you know, to the public. So thank you very much. We are going to move on to the next topic under new business, which is the economic development update. Sharon Woodbury. Oh, hello, Sharon.
Hello. So I wanted to start off with addressing some of the media coverage with the tax abatement and the series that has been running with the Business Journal. I do want to thank you, Councilwoman Adams-Ack, for reaching out to get some additional data in preparation for a panel. But I thought this was a good opportunity to bring some of the high-level points to council for your own information, and also as this may come up in your job duties, some information that might be helpful. So really quickly, with the tax abatement program, there were a lot of things that were referenced in terms of data that provided some information, but it was very skewed in terms of not looking at the other information. I understand what their objective was, but you can't fully provide that information without looking at everything. So I wanted to briefly go over the fact that our tax abatement program was largely used to address a lot of underutilized brownfield properties. We transformed 500 acres of brownfield that was generating very little in terms of property taxes. And as a result of the tax abatements, we were able to drive up the value of land. Just really quickly, with our tax abatement programs, when we provide any tax abatement to the city council, we do not abate any property taxes. And I think that gets lost in the translation sometimes. The existing value of the land, or if there's a structure in place, remains in place. We are only providing an abatement to the improvements. As a result of the investment that happens, the value of the land also increases. We've got data that shows that there has been some tremendous increase in value with these properties as a result of the tax abatement. So very quickly, Salt Springs Business Park, the value of the land alone without structures increased 462%. Performance Place increased 219%. Ohio Works increased 58%. Again, those are real estate taxes that were generated from those investments and that were not abated at all. In terms of numbers, Salt Springs Business Park, we were generating $34,000 annually in property taxes. As a result of the projects, some of them have rolled off and they're now paying full property taxes. Some of them are not, and it's just a function of the component that was not abated. But in Salt Springs Business Park, we went from $34,000 annually generated at that property prior to development to $1.39 million annually that we're getting, or that the county is receiving and our community is receiving in property taxes. Performance Place, prior to development, $8,958 was being generated annually. Now we have increased that number, and $444,000 is being generated annually in property taxes. Ohio Works, previously $12,647, and now $436,000. So there are some tremendous benefits, and the rate of new construction that's happening in the city on the commercial side is not significant. These tax abatements help to leverage that and to encourage investment in properties. On the job creation side, for active projects and companies that are still reporting, that's 20 companies. We have generated new payroll of $13 million and 246 jobs that were created. So there are some components of this that I think need to be taken into consideration with the tax abatement. I know that there has been a question of accountability and how this process works. So very quickly, when we've got a project that is being proposed, we'll review it, determine its feasibility for a tax abatement. It's presented to the mayor for approval. If the mayor gives the okay, we would then reach back out to the company, have the application generated, present that to Board of Education, then present that to City Council. None of these decisions are made without council support. And then once we are into the abatement period, Tax Incentive Review Council, we collect the data. That's what we are accountable for in terms of making sure that we're following up with these projects, getting the information. It's presented to the Tax Incentive Review Council annually. And in addition to the numbers, I will just communicate to Tax Incentive Review Council what I'm getting from the companies, what the general status of the economy is, what they might want to take into consideration before there is an action that's done. But ultimately, it resorts back to Tax Incentive Review Council in terms of whether they want to approve the incentive and continue that with moving on. Moving past that, really quickly, I know that there has been a lot of conversation about what does economic development do? What are some of our functions? I did send out a report to the group for 2019 in terms of our impact and accomplishments. In that 2019 report, you'll see that as a result of work that our office did in working with companies, we saw private investment of $34 million, 60 new jobs that were created, 560 jobs that were retained, and 16 businesses that were assisted. And it's important for council to understand that when we're assisting businesses, it's not always going to be an ordinance that comes before you for approval. That's not a basis for whether we're doing our job, because a lot of the assistance we're providing is in the area of helping them find real estate, partnering with them in finding other resources for them if the city cannot receive assistance, helping them through the permitting process. A lot of times with some of our larger projects, they need someone to work with them to help them get through what needs to be done in order for them to go from a proposed project to a finished project. So we would provide all those value added services. As a result of the contacts that we've made, those are the numbers that you'll see for 2019. In addition to that, just in terms of activity, we had 199 contacts that we worked with in terms of businesses, leads, referring properties, partnerships, sharing information. Some of that was outreach in terms of identifying particular prospects. We are actively engaged with working with businesses, and that's just an example of the numbers in terms of what we're doing. And that's contacts, but then there's all of the follow-up that occurs with it. That's a component of that as well. For pending projects, there are two pretty substantial projects that I am working on right now. I did provide council with, I think, some brief information on what we're looking at in terms of investment for those particular companies. We are positioning ourselves to present those projects to council, but there's some timing that has to take place in terms of making sure that the Board of Education receives notification. We cannot have public discussion about a project without Board of Education being aware of and having that information. That's just a state statute. But we've got some pending projects that are pretty significant, that's been pretty involved in terms of engagement and follow-ups. One project that we're looking at, a $2.7 million investment, 40 new jobs, 57 existing jobs that will be moving to the city of Youngstown if everything goes as we're hoping that it will. And then a $3.2 million proposed project, 35 new jobs and 27 existing. Those are contacts that we've made. One of those projects was a result of some ongoing efforts from our business development recruiter in following up to see, how things are going, if there's assistance the city can provide, providing them with information to help them make the decision. And I say all that just so that you're aware of what's involved with some of these projects that we're working with. Wanted to also go over some of the work that I have been, some of the larger and more involved things that I've been involved with in terms of working in the area of assisting businesses, some investment that needs to happen on the infrastructure side and in programming. So
Sharon, just 1 second. I just want to acknowledge my colleagues that I do see their hands up, but I wanted to allow you to finish with your presentation and then I'll take questions.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And so there have been some funding opportunities that we were made aware of. One of them, and part of, I think there was some discussion about this earlier in terms of broadband, as a result of there kind of being an assessment of what's happening and what's needed. Broadband was recognized as being something that's critical. It's also been very critical to our businesses. So as we're doing kind of a longer range idea of what type of infrastructure is needed, I have been working with businesses in our Salt Springs Business Park and getting some information and feedback from them in terms of what their challenges have been. So as a result of that contact that was made by businesses, I reached out to some of our broadband providers and identifying where there was a footprint, working with Hunter and YSU in terms of what that looks like in terms of mapping. And I have been able to engage with one of our providers. They are actively now working with the businesses and putting together a plan for broadband that at this point does not look like it's going to require any funding from the city. They have recognized what the need is, and they're doing some financial engineering projections. And my last conversation with them is that they believe that they can meet those needs. And so that is something that we're partnering with them on doing for Salt Springs Business Park, which is a large employer and jobs, a centralized area for jobs in the city. COVID-19 fund, I mentioned that there's a business program that I've been working on in terms of trying to assist businesses with COVID-19. That's been very involved in terms of working with Beverly and her consultant, reaching out to businesses, understanding what their needs are, talking to other communities and understanding what they've been able to do, what their, how they were able to accomplish some economic development within community development block grant guidelines. And you know, to be perfectly blunt, that's always a challenge. When we were working with funds that were not block grant funded dollars, there was a greater degree of flexibility in terms of what we could do, but Beverly's been very helpful in helping me work through that and understanding what we can do, what we can't do. We're hoping that we'll be able to roll out that program soon. And so I've been having some conversations with businesses and I'm letting them know that the city is working on that. As a part of that effort, call with Key Bank and Jumpstart, and we were able to put together a program structure that they felt that they could support. We were able to leverage an additional $20,000 in funding for that, which thanks to council, we were able to approve and get that appropriated as needed with our budget. I talked about the projects that we've got pending. Just very quickly, I just want you to understand kind of the cycle of how this works. When we've got projects, lead responses and tracking, again, Vicki's very involved in that and making sure that we keep projects live and some communication and pulse with those businesses so that we can help move that forward. There's initial meetings, information gathering on project details, getting their employment numbers, reviewing their employee and payroll data, following back up with them on negotiating incentives and finding out what their gaps are with the projects that they're proposing, taking applications, going back and forth with the documentation, making sure that we get all that data. Then if it's a project that's moving forward, the outreach to the city schools, meeting with them if necessary in terms of explaining the projects with them, emails with the state of Ohio about if it's relocation, and making sure that we've got our process in place with that and that we're complying. Drafting correspondence to the board members, giving updates to council. And then after we get that approved by council, there's a whole nother cycle to this in terms of getting the agreements together and negotiating skills. It's very involved. And I just don't know that council understands the degree of work that comes with these projects as they're coming through. And I thought this was a good opportunity to do that. Also wanted to kind of give you an update. We have been working with businesses in this COVID environment, as I said, setting up a program, but also I've used this as an opportunity to try to engage with businesses on my day-to-day interactions with them. So some of the projects or businesses I'm talking to, it's follow-up because they've got an active project. We've had communication with them. And so my calls with businesses are pretty extensive now because I want to understand what they're going through, what their sales are, where they are with their employers, what were particular challenges. So there's been a more in-depth conversation with all of the businesses as I am working with them to try to get a full picture of what's going on. EAG has been working on our behalf in helping with some outreach and getting us information on data. I want to kind of wrap this all up by kind of giving you a picture of what I've been able to get in terms of where things are in our economy with COVID. I'm sure that a lot of that you've already had some discussions with in terms of Kyle and the financial projections. But in the big picture impact of what we're looking at with businesses. In terms of where things stand, the total initial jobless claims in Ohio over the last 14 weeks as a result of COVID, there were close to $1.4 million jobless, 1.4 million claims of unemployment for the state of Ohio. Just to put that in perspective, that amount is more than the total last 3 years filed for unemployment with the state of Ohio. So we're looking at a pretty significant challenge with our economy. We're certainly going to see that in terms of result of what we'll eventually start to see in terms of our income tax generation. I think Kyle talked to you about what some of that last quarter data was looking like. There are some signs of recovery in terms of businesses opening back up, employees going back to work. This is the 8th straight week of continued unemployment benefits declining. So the trend is showing that the benefits is declining and that people are going back to work. But it's a slow process. We are still working with some pretty unprecedented numbers. The Ohio analysts that I've been working with in terms of my weekly calls with the state of Ohio and other communities, what they're saying is we can anticipate that this is a 3-year recovery process that we're looking at. So there's going to be some significant challenges that are coming our way. We're fortunate that we've got some pretty sizable projects that are still moving forward, but on the whole, things are going to be difficult for a while. In terms of unemployment numbers, just wanted to give you some perspective. In May of last year, 2019, the unemployment rate for Mahoney County was 4.9%, City of Youngstown 6.3%, Ohio 3.5%. In May of 2020, Mahoney County's 4.9% number went up to unemployment of 15.3%. Youngstown's 6.3% unemployment went up to 17.4%. Ohio's unemployment number went from 3.5% up to 13.4% in unemployment. Again, this is just so you have some sense of what our challenges are and having a pulse of what's happening as we're dealing with COVID. So that's it for now.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, because that was a lot of information. We went over a lot of things, a couple comments, and then I'll call upon my colleagues. I wanted to thank you for providing me with that information for that panel that Councilman Oliver and I did with the Business Journal, because I feel up until this point, sometimes there was an unfair narrative where the focus was on the things that perhaps were not working as planned, rather than some of, a lot of the benefits that we are able to see from tax incentives. So I was happy to see that they were able to now print and some of that information based on the information that you supplied me with. So thank you. And I also wanted to state when you were referencing the tax incentives and making sure that those organizations are in compliance. Julia spoke on that during that panel as well. And I know typically we hear that these organizations are out of compliance because perhaps they can't find the employees here within the city. So just to let everyone know and it was already published in the Business Journal, but what we are working on is holding an event to be able to obtain a database of different contractors and skilled laborers and other things of that sort. So that way, when these companies and employers come and say they can't find someone, we're then able to provide them with a list. So we're working on that, and we will keep everyone posted when that will be, and invite the public to join us. But go ahead, Julius, you had your hand up, and then Samantha.
I was just gonna say, I think a lot of times we don't put information out. So then the citizens and media outlets, they all get confused, including city council, as to what's really going on as opposed to what's speculation. So in doing that interview, I learned a lot, particularly about tax incentives and tax abatements and the contribution that they've had to the growth of our city, and including our industrial parks. So I do commend you, Sharon, on the work that you've been able to do and accomplish over the years, because a lot of people don't know about it. I wanted to make sure that I did include Councilwoman Adamczak in that interview because of her ability to be able to, in the best way possible, explain numbers and good situations to people. So she did an excellent job of that in getting that point across. We wanted to make sure that this interview did what it didn't do the first time, which is paint the city in a positive light to say that we are making progress. We are not just losing on deals, you know what I mean? And we are doing good things. So we wanted that interview to go in a positive direction, you know what I mean, to keep things moving forward and going up. So like I said, I commend you on the work you've been able to do. I commend you on the millions of dollars you've been able to bring into the city. Great job. I would just like to say, moving forward, if we could have more concentration on the smaller businesses, Black-owned businesses in the city, because I think a lot of times, and I'm not saying from you, I'm saying a lot of times the focus seems to be on the outside of the city and how do we make the city appropriate for, you know, suburbians to be able to come in and enjoy, where I think a lot of the emphasis should be put on the citizens and how do we create the best quality of life for them. And job creation with small business, we could put so many small businesses into play that they create the tax base that a large business would. You know what I mean? So I think if we was to concentrate on creating some type of Black business district to be, especially at times like this, to help out, especially like focusing on the Black YMCA over there, we can take that and make it some type of district and create other districts across the city. I think it would go a long way in boosting the morale of our citizens, business owners, and residents alike. I mean, if we could just somehow focus more. At the same time, what we got to deal with bringing the outside in, I just say if we could focus more at the same time on what the inner city, what we need to, you know what I mean? So thank you, I commend you, and thanks you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So I have a few questions. My first question is, what's in our local incentive toolbox? We talk a lot about tax abatements, but what are the other incentives that we have to offer?
So right now, what we have is the tax abatement and the float loan program that we are able to aggressively push. Float loan program in general is non-tax revenues that the city has in place that are kind of sitting idle. So instead of it sitting in a bank, we can put that money out to use with businesses for a fixed period of time. So we'll structure a loan period of 12 months where businesses will have the use of that funding without making payments to the city. We do that based on them being able to provide the city with an irrevocable letter of credit, which gives the city a great degree of security in that we're funding the projects, but the bank is agreeing to pay us back if something doesn't work out the way that it's supposed to. So that's essentially a check waiting for the city at the end of a 12-month period. It allows businesses to be able to utilize those funds, particularly if we're talking about construction or any massive investment that's happening in equipment where they're not going to see their revenue generate for some time. They need time to build that back up before the payment of the loan kicks in. So that gives them that 12-month period to kind of ramp up services. At the end of the 12-month period, they didn't have takeout financing that they have in place with the bank. And that bank is the bank that pays the city in full with its funding. We have a facade program that was funded by block grant dollars that we had in place. Again, because these are CDBG guidelines, we've had some things that we had to work through in terms of making sure that it's in compliance with CDBG and how we were getting that money out there. We went through an extensive review of areas of the city, thanks to working with John Braylage, who's with YSU, and helping us get data on low to moderate income census tracts to help us know what areas of the city would qualify just based on location, so that we were able to accomplish one of the hurdles of being able to provide assistance just based on location. And that again is data driven. When we don't have an eligibility based on location, then it gets pretty complicated in terms of job creation, because they have to have shown retention or employee of jobs that are low to moderate income residents. So then that means that the businesses are tracking their employment, the salaries, and Beverly, you may know this offhand, I believe they look at families. So it's not even just based on the income of. So there's a lot of documentation that makes it challenging for businesses to, with the cumbersomeness of the paperwork, qualify based on hiring those employees. So we try to make it simple in terms of at least identifying areas that we know qualify because they are located in a low to moderate income census tract. So we've got that facade program that we're trying to really lay a good foundation for. We put that program on hold because we wanted to make sure that we were doing it correctly. Then we had COVID come, and we had to focus on being able to assist businesses with remaining open before we could start to providing businesses for the, kind of the exterior improvements and things of that nature. But it's been very beneficial in working with John Braylage with our mapping and data, and with Hunter with some of the planning of the corridors, because we are really trying to make sure that when we're putting those facade dollars out there, there is a strategy to it. We talk a lot about trying to do corridor improvements. Those are what are adjacent to our neighborhoods, but we want to create an environment where it's destination based, where it shows that we're open for business. If there is kind of a rising tide, we can focus a cluster of businesses with doing improvements. It just makes it more attractive in drawing their customers there. So we're trying to keep that in as part of our strategy as we are rolling out the facade program in terms of how we're marketing it, targeting certain areas on corridors and working in a way that we can see the most impact for those funds. So the facade funding will be available. And we want to do the COVID, roll that out first, and then we'll be able to focus some more time on meeting CDBG guidelines and having the facade dollars out. But as of now, that's it in terms of toolbox. Council is more aware than anyone that the funding has not been there. I did start to, in prior years, look at what we could do with our land in terms of land bank and using that as an incentive. So there's some strategy on the land bank side that I think will take place, and I'll work closely with them in trying to see if that's a way that we can also use that as a tool.
Quick comment. And then I'm sorry, Samantha, but regarding even the float loan program, I just wanted to comment briefly that even some of the potential candidates for the float loan, you've done a great job too, as we're screening these to make sure that it is going to benefit, the city residents directly, and not that outside entities are coming in to use our dollars to help, other areas, which has happened in the past, but now I think the compliance has been really great on that. But go ahead, Samantha.
So I just want to make sure I have this right. We have the float loan, the facade grant that we rebuilding, and then our income tax incentive.
Property tax abatement.
Property tax
Yeah,
abatement.
tax abatement is property tax, no income tax incentives.
So no, and we're not using the income tax incentive. And like you said, you know, all these meetings, I'm trying to also gather more information and more knowledge and understanding. And there, you said you're working on some land incentives, and with broadband, that puts us into some utility incentives we could possibly have as well. So I know there's community reinvestment incentives as well as tax increment financing. So I just would like to see us have a well-rounded toolbox that we can really, you know, appeal to almost any business that comes. So that's just a comment, but a question that I had as to where we were. So thanks for providing that. And then my next question is, how are we building, or the plan, Nikki, you might be able to answer this, or Hunter, building the plan to invite infrastructure? How are we planning to begin to invite infrastructure into our community?
Through the chair, what we're doing now is land acquisition. We have an agreement with YSU, and Hunter and I have been working with John Brailage weekly, if not a couple of times a week, on mapping out the entire city, in areas of the city where there may be tax delinquent land, commingled with some city-owned land, and also some county land that's in a county land bank. So what we're looking at is those areas that we can acquire all as one developable site for attraction. So we're looking all over the city. We are working with various council to see what their plans are, what they want to see in their area, combining land through our land bank and through the county land bank, and also work with the help of the Port Authority. We have them involved in this whole process, and EAG. We're all involved in this process. We meet regularly to say, where can we make the best impact? What do we have available? What can we put, you know, in our coffers so that when that opportunity is there and Sharon's ready to market it, we have, like we always say, shovel ready sites that, you know, businesses and developers can be attracted by. So that is an ongoing process. We've made several strides, but it's a continued ongoing process.
And I believe Sharon had a direct comment to that. Go ahead.
Yep, just want to add to you know, kind of some perspective for that. So it's been very beneficial for us to kind of look at that in terms of strategy, just kind of for a historical purpose. With our business parks, we were able to see, it took a long time, but we were able to turn those around on a more larger scale, because those were large tracts of land that were abandoned by steel mills. So when we picked up that property, we were talking about 100 acres, 130 acres, very large size tracts of land for us to be able to put in place in redevelopment. What we're talking about now is slow and steady. It's more incremental. It's trying to assemble land and make that available. So we're not going to see immediate challenges on a larger scale, but it does help us with identifying developable sites and working on a long-term plan of trying to assemble and make those larger sites available for multiple tenant uses in many business parks. Many M-I-N-I, not many M-A-N-Y.
Yeah, we have about 65,000 parcels in the city of Youngstown. And as we all know, we've got a substantial tax delinquency, which is different in different parts of town. So how do we prioritize opportunities? And there are several ways to do that. One is to try to leverage the federal opportunity zone. We're benefited by declarations all along the river and in large portions of the, particularly the north side, portions of the west side, and portions of the east side by the federal designation. There's also some parts of the south side that are included. So how do we understand what's in those areas and opportunities? Because that's a federal tax incentive that has some real urgency to it and is working in other parts of our region. Second opportunity we were looking at is how do we leverage the transit system and our principal corridors, which are where we've got the highest traffic volumes, where we also have the most frequent transit system volumes, where we can provide opportunities for people to live and to work and to not necessarily have a car. Again, this is one of the big recommendations that came out of the regional plan we did finishing in about 2014 that looked at how do we take advantage of the opportunities and the assets we have in each one of our communities across Northeast Ohio. And we're benefited in Youngstown by having a robust transit system, well-funded, and one that's dedicated to providing accessibility to the citizens of Youngstown, to jobs and to services. How do we tie that to our housing strategy? How do we tie that to our economic development strategy? How do we tie that to our land assembly strategy? A third area that we can look at is land around our freeway points of access. Probably the best example is the work that was done to create the land for Chocan, which was largely abandoned residential land near a freeway point of access. We are well benefited in Youngstown as compared to other places by having accessibility to the freeway system that serves not only Youngstown, but connects us to opportunities in a 7 million person region between Cleveland and Akron on one end and Pittsburgh on the other. So where can we look at those? How do we look at these things simultaneously to make some decisions about where land should be assembled, where we should develop, and how we can attract investment that's looking objectively at places to do business that have good infrastructure, that have clean land, that have opportunities for people to get to the jobs by means other than simply relying on an automobile, and that build on the assets of this community.
Thank you, Hunter, for that information. I just quickly wanted to mention that, and I think we could have another meeting to talk about, because I know there's been a lot of research being done and studies being conducted, and that we have a plan going forward, and it was sent to us about doing strategic things in each part of town. So maybe we could discuss that at a future meeting, and then today we can kind of more focus on just the update of what's been occurring, and then we'll go ahead and schedule another meeting. Samantha, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. So back to Sharon's point. Thank you, Hunter and Nikki and Sharon, for explaining where we're going with the economic development. I have just two more questions. One is the relationships. We've talked about the Port Authority, how we're building that relationship, the land bank with the county, and the school district and their participation in the tax incentives. But I just wanted to know, how are we cultivating and working through those relationships, Sharon, with the state and with our neighboring townships and our partners that are kind of on the cusp when it comes to your economic development work?
So with the state, weekly, I am involved with calls with Team NEO, who is the state's local development branch for the Northeast Ohio region. The chamber is kind of a subset of that, in that they do a lot of the legwork. Anything that is state driven, they work through those partnering organizations. Those are pre-established. So leads, funding through Jobs Ohio, all of that is structured in a way that they're working with those teams in order to get funding out and assistance to municipalities. So weekly, I am meeting with Team NEO, discussing any updates in terms of state funding. I've been able to develop very good relationships with the state of Ohio and their Jobs Ohio group, and with Team NEO and their local leadership group. So we actually had a call with Jobs Ohio and talking about a new funding initiative that's going to be rolled out to the state. And it's specifically targeting areas that have had some challenges based on demographics. where there is not a lot of investment happening, the state has recognized that their program structure really did support those larger industries, as Councilman Oliver was saying. There weren't a lot of programs that were in place for the smaller scale impact of municipalities. So the programs that were there to help larger employers didn't help some of those smaller businesses. So they have been, taking input from municipalities and our calls and putting together what they call an inclusion program. And they are putting a funding together. Oh, I don't remember the number now. I have it down in terms of what they'll make available this year, but they're expecting to roll that out within the next couple of weeks. And as part of that, it's based on location, whether they follow these census tracts throughout the state that have had challenges similar to ours. They're focusing on minority-owned businesses, all of those kind of businesses that have historically had challenges in making funding available for those projects. So I'll be working with them on identifying projects and helping to bring those dollars locally.
Samantha.
And thank you. And just a direct follow-up. So I'm with all those partners and of course all of our surrounding municipalities, could you go over what the process is? I'm a business, like Councilman Oliver said, I'm a business coming out of Phoenix, and I would like to, develop a project. Can you go over with us, briefly what the process is, and how are we faster than our partners around us? Because a lot of our municipalities look similar to us. Are we faster than our partners around us? And do you feel at this point we are set up to win?
So you were broken up a bit, but I can kind of go over that process with you. So depending on how that lead comes in, we can get leads through the state of Ohio, and those leads will go out throughout the state. A lot of times they will have specific areas of the state that they're focused on. That might be because they've already identified workforce there. They have some other operation there, and they want to be specific to that location. So when it goes out to the communities, it will say, this is for these regions of the state of Ohio.
I'm sorry, Sherry. Let's skip that. Let's just say that we know they're coming to Youngstown. They want to come to Youngstown right now. What's our process, and are we set up to win? And again, are we faster than anybody else that they could be considering in getting them through the process?
So there's always room for improvement. And when I sit down with those businesses, first I want to understand, why is Youngstown on your radar? What can we do? What has, kind of helped us rise to the top, so that I can track, things that we want to make sure that we're marketing and talking about our area. So once they've identified this as a particular area, I will ask them, what kind of service do you need? Do you need help with finding land? Do you have a gap in funding in terms of financing? And we can assist with that, understanding what their needs are. It's not always going to be an incentive. A lot of times they ask, but sometimes they're not looking for incentives from the city. They're looking for some other form of assistance. So it's a question of working with those businesses and understanding what their particular needs are. What can we do to seal the deal? So once I understand what that is, then it goes through similar to that process that I talked about. I'll look at the project as a whole, see what those gaps are. If there's some assistance that the city is offering financially, then I will bring that to the mayor's attention and let them know that I've been working with them. These are the incentives that I'm recommending, and that it feels like this can help make that deal work. Mayor will say yay or nay to that. And then we work on trying to finalize that and put together a package if it has to go before City Council for approval.
So I'm sorry, direct follow-up. So I come in, let's say January 1, and what from that day to the day I can break ground, what would you say that would be? We can get things moving through our system and our process and handle inside of a 3-month period or inside of a 6-month period. At least that's what I'm saying, is that if we have businesses come in, can we process them and get them through our process quickly and efficiently, or at this point, are we, you know, kind of behind in other, from other municipalities?
So I think that depending on what it is, so if there's some challenges, for example, they need to have zoning changes or replats, you know, things of that nature. There's a process for that. I've actually been talking with Hunter, and you know, he's really tried to understand what all of those steps are, and we're talking about how we can streamline that, because it does take a while. Some businesses are more wanting to fast track it depending on, you know, where they are. Some of them come to us early, so it's okay for us to work through the process that it takes. But there have been times where there's some frustration in that whole approval process takes a while, because there's public hearings that are involved, the timing of the meetings. And so those are all things that Hunter and I have kind of talked about in terms of what we see as maybe areas that can be streamlined. So that's a work in progress, and is something that that we are looking to do.
Thank you, Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
Julius, you had your hand up.
So, Samantha, you never mind. Good questions. So, Sharon, I know we've had these marketing videos I constantly talk. I got like 3 points. That's all. These marketing videos we talk about a lot, and I know we've paid for them and we have them. I still haven't seen them like widely circulated. But I know at one point it was that we weren't ready to put that information out. But I think if we put that information out, like you know, like we fishing, we throw the line out, we see who bites. You know, we make Youngstown attractive. We toot our horn on, you know, our infrastructure and the size of our city and what we're able to, you know, what we're able to facilitate here. And I think if companies knew, they would start to look. So first question is basically, where are we and how do we go about the process of actually putting out the feelers or putting out those, you know, those hooks to companies and corporations and letting them know you could, you know, locate here in Youngstown and be able to have a good workforce, and we have the land to, you know, make these things happen. How are we going about doing that, and where are we at with circulating those videos that we paid for?
So the marketing is something that we have got to kind of do better at in terms of being able to sell the city. We had that funding that was available through the City of U. There were some things that were done in terms of kind of that social media campaign and, you know, all of that. The hard deliverables in terms of pamphlets or brochures and things of that nature didn't come from that. I had worked with Kyle in setting aside money for that. And then we got to a budget crisis and the money needed to be spent in some other way. So we had the videos that were in place. I think it's a component, but it has to be part of a larger strategy. And I understand and respect what you're saying in terms of being able to do that. So it's good that we have them. Part of that conversation, and I think you were a part of some of those meetings, Councilman Oliver, was we had kind of a series of videos, but I had wanted to have something that was kind of a bit more general marketing of the city of Youngstown, really kind of talking about infrastructure and our labor and our workforce, having something that was part of that draw when we were reaching out to businesses. We didn't really get the clips that I was looking for in order to have kind of that general marketing video, but we've got a lot of content that we can work with in order to accomplish that. I think her name is Cynthia. I had actually reached out to her or had Vicky reach out to her last year to have a sit down and try to figure out what we could do in terms of using those dollars. And it has not moved forward. It's still on our radar. Our I think our efforts have kind of been stretched thin in terms of what we can do because it gets to be time intensive in terms of working through that. But it is a priority, something that we're trying to put together as part of a campaign. I did put that on pause when I was working with this sometime last year because the mayor did want to do a strategic plan. And I wanted to make sure that when we put that marketing piece together, that it reflected that strategic plan. So some of them are pieces that we want to move together on so that they are supporting each other.
Direct follow-up.
So is this real, Councilwoman Turner, is this directly related to Julius's? Yes. Okay, and then we'll go back to Julius's other questions. Go ahead.
So I would love to see those videos because we, as a council and as a city, we must be disciplined in our messaging and have a collective message when we come to marketing the city. And as Nikki has explained to us, a large part of your job going forward, Sharon, is going to be selling. So I'm saying like 80% of your job is selling the city and being that like saleswoman that's out there putting our message forward. So I wanted to know if in that same vein, if you could tell us what your strategies are to market the city and sell the city in a more clear, concise manner, and what you would need from us to be more disciplined in that message, in our messaging as well.
So I appreciate council wanting to be consistent with what we're doing. Part of, again, what I want to make sure that we're doing is that we are aligning with what our strategic plan is, because that is basically identifying, what our priorities are for the city, what our strengths are for the city. It should reflect that. So we have been working with the state of Ohio and trying to get funding to do that. Hunter has been kind of a point of contact in moving that forward now. So it will be in tandem with that. I have been reaching out to Team Neo and getting some data and understanding what the data says about our clusters and what we can do in terms of the industries that we want to promote. We've got some emerging technologies that I don't think have bubbled to the surface in terms of what we can do, just because it's relatively new. And I'm talking about the additive manufacturing component and what YBI is doing. We've got America Makes in place. So, some of that is the data that we're getting kind of on that macro level, but then trying to blend it with what we've got going on locally in order to put together a good piece. And again, that all becomes a part of this strategic plan. Beyond that, so what conversations that we've had before is sitting down with Akron. We sat down with them and talked with their administration about how they put their plan together. And there were some very specific points in terms of what they had prioritized, what they wanted to continually pound as the message for Akron, which is what I think we need to do. I wanted to see where we are with that in terms of, what are those consistent messages? What are our priorities? What we want to continue to say as a benchmark? This is where we want to start. This is, what we want to continue to measure progress with. So all of those, I think that we'll be able to more easily target in on with the strategic plan. But I have been working with Ohio and trying to see if we can use that funding. So initially, they talked about that inclusion program, that maybe being a funding source for us in terms of being able to use that either with engaging with the consultant or, some of the reports and data that need to occur. I think we've been able to manage a lot of that now, now that we have Hunter on the team. There may be some additional funding that we need in order to kind of round that out. But after that, then it's going to come back to dollars for marketing. So yes, we do have the video, but then we need to actually have some tangible, some things that we're putting just in terms of whether it's folders or brochures or any additional editing that needs to be done on the video component. So there's going to be some dollars that we need in order to put everything into effort but kind of, I just want you to understand the legwork is being done in order to get to that point.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. Thank you, Sharon, because I know this meeting has been really lengthy, and I think you gave us an update, and I think we can schedule meetings to talk about it some more in the future. And I think it would be beneficial too, if maybe we can just have quarterly updates on any kind of activities or projects, that you're working on to keep us as council and our, our citizens abreast of what's going on in the city. Julius, I know you still had questions. Did you have anything else specific to our update, or would you like to set a time and schedule another meeting to go more in depth about particular topics?
Sounds like you're suggesting that we set another meeting, so I'll go with
Yeah,
this.
people, I just feel we're 3.5 hours in, and at some point people are, it's long, and even for the sake of our audience.
I had 2 more questions that require really long answers, so I want to just continue on. I enjoy my time with you guys. So. We can set
Did you want to mention? Go ahead and mention what you wanted to discuss, so that way it could be on the radar, and we can prepare for it at a future date to go more in depth.
Well, there's 2 things. Setting up a meeting with guys like Greg that was on that Business Journal interview, because he had a lot of great suggestions, things we can do other than tax abatements. And 2, just trying to figure out what is our relationship with the county land bank. What exactly is the county land bank? Who do they benefit? And, how are they buying up so much of our city, and who is it for? So just some things that we can talk about next time. I got some more stuff too, but we've been sitting here for a while.
Okay. I think, I think this is going to require ongoing conversation. I guess it kind of goes in conjunction with restructuring, the whole department. And it seems that there's a lot of things going on, but it's good for us to know that there, what has been going on, because there's a lot of things that are done behind the scenes that maybe we're not aware of. So it appears as though nothing is happening, when the reality is a lot is occurring. But I think we've received a lot of information today. So we'll have to look at dates to then schedule another meeting. And I'll just state again, just so if we could obtain all the information that council requested from the CDA department. And the next item on the agenda is to schedule a meeting, and that date will be determined in the future. So at this time, if there's no other comments, if I could have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. And we are now adjourned at 12:33. Thank you, everyone.